Hello. Are we live? Looks like we're live now. Or I am. I might or might not have people come on with me tonight. We've had some technical difficulties, but we also might see Jonathan Streeter pop on. Invited a couple other people too, but we'll see if it happens or not. Or I might just be ranting out of the Longhouse into the Longhouse. Very first comment: Timothy Jones, Mormonism isn't the Longhouse. It can be. I wouldn't call it like for sure the Longhouse. But it's got some Longhouse elements in it sometimes, at least in some of the wards we grew up. But of course, a lot of the people we know say it's patriarchy. Patriarchy. Let me see if anybody's coming. Flip might be coming in. He had computer problems. Jared is out of town. Haven't heard from Kevin. He's probably busy with tons of family, taking them all to Barbie movies, I'm guessing. More likely Oppenheimer or something. I don't know. And we might see Jonathan pop on here. I invited Marty, but I don't think she has time either. But we'll see. But let's see if I can rant a little bit first. The Longhouse. Did everybody research the Longhouse? Anybody still listening? Maybe I should hold up a second to see if people pop in. But let's listen to this. Yep, you might be popping on. Talk Barbie. Nothing enticed him more than Barbie. Say, let's talk Barbie, Jonathan. He's like, I don't think I can pass a Barbie.
What up, Council? I am here to discuss artificial intelligence. AI is going to take all of our jobs and render us useless. And I, for one, am stoked. I hate jobs. I had a job once, and everyone there talked in weird voices. AI is going to 86 all of that. But we'll still need money. That is why I'm asking the government to step up and make sure we're breaded. We are proposing a small payment plan or small.
This is just a guy talking to city council, man. I mean, I guess he has some good points.
Small PP of 10G a month for every citizen so we can party and look hot and enjoy our free.
I'm just wasting time. Like this guy's wasting time. Here we go. Hey,
what
lying?
You've been saying, so I'm coming in cold.
Coming in cold. All right. I was just listening to this guy talk very deep about AI.
Now, we can't afford to just sit back and have AI bust through and not have a plan. We got to make sure people have food and houses so we can party and rage in peace. So instruct AI to pay all of us, and then you dudes can retire gracefully before you get replaced, and we'll see you at the beach.
That's some Ken stuff coming in. Yeah.
Is that the guy that shows up and does parody testimony before all these different congressional houses about?
No, I don't know. Unless he is a different one, because like a lot of people picked up on it, but that's not the. It's not the dude. What's his name? Alex Stein. That's not Alex Stein.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure this guy's goofing off, but at least he's arguing for us to be able to hang out at the beach just like Ken does. So did you see Barbie?
No, not yet. It's definitely on my list of things I want to see because there've been so many takes from so many different angles, and I'm eager to see what strikes me about it.
I haven't seen it either, but I'll probably watch it I don't want to go to any theater ever again. I'm going to see if I can pull that off. We'll see if it even lasts a couple months, but I'm going to try to do it for life. But even though my sister runs a theater,
you're punishing all of these poor theater owners for your angst about the studio executives and the script writers and everything. That's
true. That's no principle thing. I just hate the theater. I can't hear movies very well.
They can only get so far charging $14 for a bucket of popcorn.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, but I've probably, just like I never saw The Last Jedi, but I've seen The Last Jedi because I read all the different things and heard all the different reviews. I've basically seen the Barbie movie already. I just haven't seen it.
I will hook you up. Don't worry.
Don't get in trouble, man. Don't get in trouble. But I've seen it. I mean, I've basically seen it, and a lot of stuff kind of floated around. about-
It seems like it's a bit of a Rorschach test for
yes.
people, because I've seen some people that, you know, are like, oh, you can only look at Ken and then put yourself in his shoes, and finally you'll get it. You'll understand why women have been placed in this role where their whole identity is only, you know, in service to the man that she happens to be attached to. And so there's like that perspective, and then there's the other people that are like, well, actually, you know, there, if you look at the story of Ken, it's actually really inspiring, or it's depicting the plight that men have right now, where even though men are still depicted as like the oppressive ones in society, it's women that are, you know, in the knowledge based economy doing the best.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I was gonna Photoshop that onto the Ken thing I did today, but then when I put it on, you couldn't tell that it was the Ken thing. But I mean, I was up the same alley that it seems like, well, that, and on top of that too, if you think about all those years of kind of leftist reviewing of movies, like that kid who reviews the "Is It Gay" film, and then if you went through college like I did to review any old book, they could turn anything into their message. It seems like the reactionaries have learned how to do that back. Like, we can turn anything into our message too. And it happened a little bit with I remember it happened with Black Panther, and now it seems to be happening with Kenocracy and Ken. But
I feel like Black Panther, like, I feel like that, to me, the first Black Panther film was some smart storytelling where they had these two major characters that were at odds with each other, that took a very different approach to things, and it was kind of analogous to the Martin Luther King versus the Malcolm X approach to some of the issues, and then they kind of played that out in metaphorical form. So I don't know if that's just another example. I feel like that was intentional. I don't know that that's just, you know, they're just telling a story and then people happen to overlay that perspective on it. To me, that was kind of before Disney kind of went over the cliff into the identity.
There was that, but where some of the what do you call it? The ones who annex it in, not annex it, but what's the other word for that? Where they steal it or they co-opt it. That's the word.
Appropriate it.
Appropriate it is they said the guys from whatever Wakanda were nationalists. You know, they were ethno-nationalists, and the argument was they shouldn't allow people they shouldn't open up to the whole entire world, or somebody else was saying yes. And so the bad guy of the movie was arguing for them to open up to the entire world and let in that, you know, that sort of stuff. And the heroes were the ethno-nationalists, and that's some of the people who tried to co-opt it and say that, hey, did you notice that you guys made that argument yourselves? And but this Kenocracy thing, like Jared shared with us a meme about somebody showing Ken to be almost what was like almost like a Muslim or something like that, and that cracks me up. But I Hypocrite had a video kind of just showing how even some really far right people were kind of co-opting the Ken idea, you know, far right. Well, although some of these were actual, some of those types. Where is it here?
Well, I'm eager to watch it because I want to be able to have my own riff or take on the Ken thing.
Or is that even true? And is Barbie actually a subversive red pill film about the virtues of heterosexuality? These are the pressing issues of the day. As I'm sure you know, the film has released to box office breaking records and rave reviews from critics and audiences alike. But not everybody is happy. In the conservative sphere of YouTube, this film has spawned what I like to call the discourse. Here's a little sample.
This movie is not just a piece of shit. This movie is a flaming piece of dog shit piled atop an entire dumpster on fire, piled atop a landfill filled with dog shit. It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
All right, so the Barbie movie is a very complex stimulus. a very complex stimulus that is not simple to understand.
The fact that Barbie is a comedy definitely helps to disguise just how nefarious this film is.
They couldn't make an innocent Barbie fantasy. Why? Because Barbie is too idealistic. She represents idealized beauty and femininity, and even to the extent that she's feminist, she's too white and she's too fucking blonde and too perfect. And
there's Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is even like, I can like Barbie because they read their whatever coding into it or something like that.
left and the left vanguard in society is at war with those concepts themselves. They're at war with whiteness. They're at war with idealization, excellence, beauty.
Every joke that happens in this film happens basically within the first 45 seconds of the film. So, for example, Barbie turns on the water and there's no water. Ooh, because, like in Barbie house, there's no actual water. Do you get it? And then she drinks, but there's no actual liquid in the actual cup. Oh my God, because she's a Barbie doll. Oh, I get it. Okay.
Jared,
Why does he look like?
What the
It
hell?
looks like the cover of every men's hair dye box that you'll find. Jared, no.
You're in Jersey?
I'm in Jersey.
Nice. That's just right off the cell phone. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I'm just on my cell phone. I just saw that there was anti-Jared on here, so I thought I'd bring the other side of the opinion.
He only came on with the agreement that you wouldn't be anywhere near this.
I'm gonna have to.
He felt more
have to sign
comfortable
off.
watching Nick Fuentes than having you here. But,
You're watching Nick Fuentes?
well, yeah, they have clips of Nick Fuentes talking about Barbie.
Oh, if you want, I heard you were talking about Black Panther earlier. If you ever want a riot, listen to Richard Spencer do a full review of Black Panther.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. They
Oh, were ya?
co-opted it. No, I didn't say Richard Spencer, but you're right. Yeah.
No, he actually does a full review of the Black Panther, and it's pretty great.
And some of it's actually kind of like hilarious. It's hilarious how they co-opted it in some ways.
Yeah, he
And then-
immediately just talks about how if it were the Dutch, they would have domesticated the zebra a long time ago or something. Which then you look it up and you find out that zebras are actually crazy difficult to domesticate.
Yeah, you can't do it. Yeah. It's goofy stuff, but I don't know. It's kind of out of the playbook of the left because for years they would co-opt whatever sort of thing and make it their message.
So Ben Shapiro's been on one with this whole Barbie thing, hasn't he?
Oh yeah.
I actually on the plane ride I listened to his. I don't usually listen to him talk about movies because he's usually not very good at it. But
no,
I listened to his full Barbie review on the plane ride, and
he's actually usually kind of pretty normy about stuff too. He's like, "Wow, I like Star Wars. It's pretty good." You know?
so he was kind of one of the better ones on the Daily Wire because honestly, the most reasonable artsy person on Daily Wire is Andrew Klavan, but he was better than like Matt Walsh or Michael Knowles. But I don't know. Anyway, Barbie sounds like fun. I actually kind of want to watch Barbie now that I've seen all this. You got to watch it as a Shakespearean tragedy type takes. It was pretty great.
So look at this. Like on the channel, Shapiro and Brett Cooper debated if Barbie was good because she, of course, loved it. Right?
She loved it.
Is that her? Is that Shapiro's little sister or something?
It seems
Are they
like
related?
it.
She looks like him, huh?
She looks a ton like him, and everybody says it, but no, she's just some gal they picked up online who just does commentary and videos, and
she mostly just does TikTok reactions, which I think is what is ruining the Daily Wire.
Yeah, she just sits and watches stuff and says, "Wow, that was dumb." She doesn't really comment that much, but
it took off so quickly that now Ben Shapiro and like Matt Walsh are doing all these
reactions.
I'm like, no, just.
But
we're
going to
use it here
understand that the
'cause this
magic is not in the act of watching. The magic is in being photogenic while you watch it.
I guess.
We're going to see if we can exploit it tonight. We're going to have Jonathan Streeter do reaction videos to watching Nick Fuentes. We'll see the photogenic stuff.
So I will say that the fact that there are so many people with strong opinions on either side of that is kind of a hallmark of a successful provocative movie.
I think so too.
It did increase my desire to watch it as well.
So all you got to do if you're doing reactions to TikToks, you got to do that thing where you stay completely silent and you just like do the OK symbol a lot and you like point up and thumbs up and That's what I've learned is the right way to do TikToks. I hate TikTok. I hope it dies. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I got. I was just popping in to be the pro Jared for a second, but
Oh, you're just popping in for a second? All
yeah,
right.
yeah, I gotta head
We're gonna
out.
miss you, man.
Well, have
All
fun
right.
out there.
Have fun, Anti Jared. We'll see you guys.
Bye. Yeah, so speaking of like Rorschach, the character, is a character that everybody loves and goes crazy for. And if you know Alan Moore at all, Alan Moore hated Rorschach. Like he thought Rorschach was supposed to be the worst, most horrible, most vile kind of Ayn Randian terrible thing. And he didn't know that, he was just trying to be honest or kind of paint like the actual picture of what his philosophy might be. And he didn't know people would love it and identify with it. But that actually kind of goes well to go with back when people would kind of do better art. If you did better art, you might accidentally make something that both sides can see some value in because you're being honest a little bit more than the other idea, I guess. But let me see here. Back to this one. Yeah, so these are a bunch of like
That's all the jokes.
different
And are
opinions. from-
suffering under the foot of the patriarchy. What's
it, of
actually
course.
happening is that toxic feminism.
Not really a vindication of Hollywood or
He
the
hated it.
Defensive way, saying, I know, I'm too white, I'm too perfect, fuck me, this is terrible.
So his whole point is just the beauty of Barbie just defeats all, like just the view of it. And that's kind of what Brittany Venti also said about it. It's like she called it bimbo kino. And she says it doesn't matter. Kino is like that Reddit term for a good movie or great or something like that. It's
Oh, yeah? Okay.
for. And she says it's bimbo kino. She said it doesn't matter what on earth the stories was because it's just showing bimbos having fun as bimbos. It's almost kind of like that thing of like, well, it's just feminism being feminism. I'm not the ideological feminism, just female archetypes acting like bimbos. It can't go wrong. It's just the imagery of it and all that sorts of stuff. That was her take on it. And
Terrible.
We cannot have nice things with Hollywood as it is. This movie is super woke.
Aren't the women majority? Do they not have agency, the women? They have no agency, apparently. So apparently the women have no agency and they are a majority.
Love the part at the end where Barbie finally realizes that feminism's cancer. And then she finds out that Ken's a high-value alpha that deserves to be treated right. And Ken deserves bitches because he's the man. And he should have dinner prepared for him. And you thought that was crazy. I couldn't imagine the second half where she takes down the deep state.
I think most of us simply expected the movie not to be a man-hating pile of garbage. Don't waste your time watching it.
You can take this pink shoe and remain Barbie forever, or you can take this ugly brown shoe and see the and see the reality of LA. That is so funny.
I don't get it, man. Regardless of ideology, the plot of Barbie was disjointed and convoluted. The characters were not well developed. And I didn't understand the ending. Oh man, it has to.
I want to see what's his name? Sarah. What's his first name?
Michael Cera.
Yeah, I just want to see Michael Cera's character and how they managed to fit the ultimate beta male into the paradigm of all these alpha Kens around there. And what is his archetype?
So this is, you said the Longhouse was kind of like a new term to you last week. We talked about it like a few months ago, but just for a little bit. But this tweet came out. I mean, we were talking Longhouse last week before all the stuff came up of Ken beating Longhouse. I mean, we weren't even talking about Ken. It's just kind of coincidental that we were talking about the Longhouse, and then the Longhouse became a big fat thing with Ken out of nowhere. This says the whole thing has like a sub story of Ken trying to revolt and fight against the Longhouse. Ken is Prometheus, and perhaps you are too. Take a look at the parallels between Ken's world and ours. And Ken is you. He's an exaggerated Western man in the 21st century, anxious, confused, chasing women who don't care about him. He exists in the Longhouse, discovers his own will to power. Like you, he decides to bring the knowledge back to his fellow man. So good. Listen to me. This is Ryan Gosling here. He has been the most celebrated avatar of outcast men in our society for years. Ken is the exaggerated antagonist turned hero. Yeah, this is the same thing here. Is like, it was the same thing with Archie Bunker. Like Archie Bunker was supposed to be vile, and then everybody loved Archie Bunker, right? And that's happened a little bit too, like Dale and conspiracy theories and all that sorts of stuff. If you haven't seen it, Gosling finds himself portraying Ken, a doll designed to vie for Barbie's love and affection for eternity, an all too modern bugman in a gynocentric world. Garwick thought she was just making incisive social commentary by creating a Barbie land where men have no social worth and get tired of that, when this is just the world we are actually living in. I don't know. I think if it creates this type of commentary and all that stuff, if it's just a joke or if it's real or if it's not, I think it did what it should have, or the best you could hope for from a movie like that, is kind of create that.
It sounds like what they've done is they've taken all of the kind of one-sided biased interpretations of the plight of women and the powerlessness of women that were the mainstay of certain corners of feminist arguments that they used to demonize the patriarchy. And then they said, let's just apply all of those to Ken in a gender swapped role, so all those men can finally wake up to the truth of these things, when certainly people have looked at those arguments and said, well, it's not actually that. There are aspects of women, feminine power or femininity in society that don't, the way that they're portraying that all women are disempowered and all women have no agency and things like that, that's not actually the case. But if you use the feminist argument that is the one that really exists in all of our minds, and then create an inversion of that to be this Ken character, then that, to me, that sounds just like a typical Hollywood thing. That's like what, of course, Hollywood's going to do that. That way, if anyone says, hey, why'd you guys make Ken such a stooge? He's just an NPC or whatever. Then they'll say, exactly. See, that's the plight of women. Well, it sounds like it's more than that, but it may be that it accidentally tripped into being more than that. But again,
yes,
I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
They're in an alternate world, the Barbies and all that sort of stuff, and it's kind of like a Plato's cave, because each of the Barbies or whatever in there represent a Barbie that's being played with in our world or something like that. And so then they got to come into our world because something changes with whoever's playing with the main character Barbie doll or whatever. But you're exactly right that in this Plato's cave or alternate world of the Barbie world, it's supposed to be, well, what if everything was reversed on men, how we assume it was in the 1950s for women, even though that's a caricature, And then, of course, in that world, the men have nothing to do and just sit around and just pine over the women, and they can't work. None of them do any jobs. None of them do anything. They just sit there doing that. And then when he goes to the real world with them, and then supposedly the real world's over hyper masculinated, like guys are walking around slapping. It's a caricature of this world too,
Yeah, exactly.
And then he goes and sees that and says, I'm taking that back to Barbie world. And he goes back to Barbie world and creates a Kenocracy there. Like he just goes off the rails. Like, I'm going to bring this back to everybody. And some people notice, like, this is one of the things, like, they're accidental. You're sure it's accidental plots, but when he goes back, all these like really feminine, like beautiful women or whatever, the ones who go along with it, and the ones who don't go along with it, the ones who are upset, are the trans Barbie, the beta Sarah, the fatter ones or whatever. But the beautiful bimbo ones or whatever are like, ooh, Ken, yeah, we're going with this. And that sort of stuff, you kind of like wonder if, like, do you guys like not stop and think about the implications of some of the stuff you're saying there? I just don't get how they don't get that, how that, I think it sails past them that could be turned around. And then they should realize, like 10 minutes later, like, oh yeah, oh geez, we probably could have avoided that messaging right there on accident. But like the Longhouse, Barbie is a land filled with houses with no walls. So that's the Longhouse stuff. The activity is limited. The Longhouse reason is made impossible in Barbie land because the dolls, they have no genitals or any concept of sex. Ken starts off as a feminist ideal man, a totally subservient man with a desire for Barbie that is not even sexual. It's just programming. He does not know why he wants to sleep over. He just knows it's something he should want. This all changes when Ken has an opportunity to leave the Longhouse for a taste of the exaggerated patriarchal real world. Ken is immediately inspired by the achievements of the Faustian man. He develops a fascination with horses, high IQ professions, and feeling respected. I was just gonna say I had something to say on Faust. This is gonna be a jag. I recently read Faust by Goethe. You ever read that?
No, I in my studies about John Dee, I was told that it was kind of a parallel of John Dee's exploration with the magical arts, but I know the skeleton of the story. That's about it.
Yeah, so the Faustian man, it's always brought up when it's a world of like accepting more technology in exchange for your soul a little bit or stuff like that. But I didn't realize that Goethe, well, you know how we're all kind of pissed at Disney for altering the stories, like altering the fairy tales for current sensibilities. Goethe did that to Faust. I had no clue that that's what was going on at that time. From like the original longtime Faustian story is that you sell your soul to that little devil, you get your moment or lifetime of bliss or whatever, and then of course you go to hell for that, and there's no turning it around, and it's a tragedy, and it's a fairy tale tragedy and all that stuff. Goethe got him out of it. Goethe took it and said, "Oh, he can both have them both. He can do the whatever sexy times with the woman and get the little gal. Plus, he's able to get out of it in the end because he's able to, I don't even know what, but it was already like a Disney-fied version of let's totally trounce the messaging in this for some.
But it turns it then into more of a Campbell type myth, because then there's a redemption arc because he makes the deal with the devil. He goes down to the depths, and then when it's time for his soul to be claimed, there's this idea that I guess God is so forgiving, and that you're never the one thing the devil does not ever have on you is that you can never turn back, or you can never work towards redemption.
Yeah, so it's redemptive, but then some people also kind of say it was Goethe being subversive in the sense of saying like, oh, you can have your sins and still get out of all this stuff.
Eat, drink, and be merry.
Eat, drink, and be merry, and you'll still get out of it. You can repent later type deal. And I mean, it actually kind of fits in with some of the Goethe stuff because Goethe was, a bit of kind of the similar type of thing. Even though obviously he's kind of better than Disney writers nowadays, but he was kind of a subversive power or writer in his time frame. But the weird Barbies try to usurp Kendom by literally brainwashing the other women with feminist talking points in order to break up the unity of the Kens. They engage in polyamorous activity to get the Kens jealous of each other once again.
This is really in the plot?
Yeah. That's funny because this week we Mormon Book Reviews had talked about polyamory in the Community of Christ. Do they? I didn't grasp it. I was just listening to the person's individual story, and I didn't grasp entirely what the Community of Christ believes. Are they for that, or do they trounce that stuff out too?
Well, I think because their whole religious paradigm started on a rejection of the idea that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. Later, I think they came to terms with that reality, but that was like decades, if not a century later. And so now in the push that the guest on that show, Evan Charley, had to get the first presidency to recognize polyamorous relationships as not exclusive of the priesthood, they issued a letter that they're calling like the February policy in parallel to the November policy about the children of gay couples in the church that specifically reaffirmed their long-standing policy that only monogamous and single people can hold priesthood in the Community of Christ. And that, of course, from the activist mindset, and the guest that they had on said this multiple times, he interprets that as them not seeing his family as being worthy. And so that's the dilemma he's in. She's in. Dilemma she's in.
So they're still saying no, we're not doing that thing because we're definitely anti.
They're holding to it. Yeah. Wow. But I mean, there are people, if you read the comments under that episode, there are people saying, in the last half of the last century, they held discussion and hearing sessions with gay members to try to educate and in some sense normalize that homosexual members were just like you and me, and that did a great deal of work towards softening the divide between them that ultimately led to them not feeling exclusive towards homosexual members. And they're hopeful that will happen again now with the issue of polyamory. But it just seems to be so close to a very decisive or a very critical point of departure from the conventional Mormon church that I think it would be a hard sell for them, particularly because they seem to be a democratically run in terms of their polity organization where they meet together in regular conferences and vote on policy. So we'll see.
Nowadays, it wouldn't be kind of easier to democratically push the polyamory, or is that still the worm hasn't turned on that quite yet? Still,
yeah, I don't know. He just wrote a letter to the first presidency of that church asking for them to not take a stance that would exclude him and others who were engaged in polyamory from the priesthood, because he mentioned that there was a different active serving priesthood holder who came out as polyamorous that was then had to, I guess, be taken out of their position for it. And so it's a very fascinating discussion. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, let's do it on Mormon Book Reviews with Stephen over there.
The thing about Stephen Pinegar, I was just impressed with his ability, and he was able to do it from a gosh, gee willikers, I don't understand all this stuff, but he asked a bunch of really critical questions about sexuality and gender and polyamory.
Identity.
Of his guest, and so after you hear the answer to all of those things, you just have to step back and say, well, are all of these things that he's talking about chosen behaviors, or are they some sort of essential idea? And the idea that polyamory is not a chosen behavior but some sort of intrinsic aspect of your identity, I think is one that you're going to find people disagree quite a bit on that. And so that's just a fascinating aspect to that discussion.
That's such a weird thing, because I mean, I would think that it's obvious that polyamory, as far as sexual desire goes, is obviously universal, but that's not people's sexuality.
That's why it's so great that
that's
why it's so great that I'm in this summary. They're saying that all of the marginalized ones tried to promote polyamory in order to break up the unity of the Kens, to make them all jealous of each other or something like that. Because I think that's it's so funny, because not only was there the Steve Pinegar Mormon Book Reviews discussion about polyamory, but then there was also the Zelf on the Shelf discussion that covered some polyamory stuff. And the idea that polyamorous people just have so much love to give, and that's why they're able to, that's why they need to be in those relationships.
Yeah, Zelf said that. You're right.
And it's like, okay, it's just like a normal human impulse to feel attraction, like that's normal. But the thing is, when you come together in a relationship, with the expectation of fidelity and monogamy, then you draw boundaries in your mind and in your heart with that knowledge, knowing that you're going to have those attractions, and that if you act on them or dwell on them or pursue them, then they're going to betray your primary relationship. And so you keep those things at a distance. At least that's something that somebody who respects their relationship would understand is just a normal thing. Because it's not like there's these special people who when they're in a relationship, they actually find other people attractive, and it's just these weird people that are like that. It's like, no, that's the human nature. That's like everybody. You just have to, the decision to come together in a relationship involves understanding that dynamic and choosing not to pursue it.
Yeah, and for other purposes, higher purposes, for kingdom building purposes. Because I mean, we looked it up. Like, monogamy really came around the same time that the idea of property came around, thousands of years ago, not recently, not 1950, like people sometimes try to paint up. And it has to do with keeping yours close, keeping your kin close, keeping yours within. There's been so many recent things that kind of say that the nuclear family as we see it was kind of invention of just 50 years ago and 60 years ago, and I just kind of go, no, maybe you're talking about something where they're just the little nuclear family and grandma and grandpa aren't there, and maybe it used to be that for sure grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle and y'all kind of lived in the same place, which is how it happened in more poorer societies. But that didn't mean that same little nuclear family wasn't there, and it hasn't been there for thousands of years. It's so goofy, but
it's that, I mean, the multi-generational home still is a monogamous and a home built on fidelity and commitment. That's one of those things that I don't know, if you do throw out all the baby and the bathwater once you leave the church, you find a lot of people having to start from ground zero and rediscover what's right and what's wrong. And I think if you just say, okay, the church was just a list of a whole bunch of arbitrary rules and commandments bent only on maintaining power for those that are in power, therefore we must throw it all away. That's one perspective. But there's another perspective, which is that the church kind of just was a vehicle of conveyance of values and principles that do happen to set out a pattern for a productive, fulfilling life and harmony and stability in relationships. And, those things work by the nature of their utility in and of themselves, regardless of whether a prophet or God tells you to do that. And so, you can, when monogamy and fidelity comes up in many different cultures under many different religious and other cultural paradigms, that's, it works for a reason in that regard.
Yeah. So, I mean, to go off the meme that I put at the beginning of this, I said, maybe some people think Mormonism is a form of longhouse or something that constrains you and that sort of deal. I was kind of making a joke. It wasn't necessarily that was, but some person leaving it thinks they're leaving in the longhouse. But as this thing is pointing out, what the longhouse is kind of really actually our society as it is right now, which, if that they're at least pointing to that, and I agree to it to some extent, like all the safetyism, scientism, all the different things that I pointed to on it. And so you think you're going to this thing of like new maximal freedom, but it's actually really kind of like a constraining thing. And I would say the same thing might happen with polyamory in a different way. Like there's so many different ways where you have to learn kind of through hands-on life that restricting yourself leads to a freedom. And that seems like such a Christian thing, but it doesn't even have to be a Christian thing or something like that. Like you should be able to just learn that from like the laws of the world, longhouse is all the way down. Yeah.
It's so funny to hear feminists advocate for polyamory as well, or people who would describe themselves as feminists, because there's like this one core biologic reality at the heart of human relationships. And that is that women pay a much greater toll for in a relationship when something like pregnancy happens. And that's just like a biological reality that no amount of equality in society can change. And so society tries to adapt to accommodate for that. And that's where we might find some aspects of family law and divorce court and things like that to try to account for that. But when you have this polyamory thing where, I don't know, we used to criticize polygamy because Brigham Young could like be unhappy with one wife and say, it doesn't matter, I'll just go to this other wife. So there's no incentive for him to reconcile or do the emotional work of repairing that relationship. And it puts an adversarial dynamic in between partners. Well, polyamory doesn't necessarily not include that same problem. And, when children enter into the mix, I think it really does raise the stakes of that. And from a woman's perspective, if you're trying to maximize protecting women's interests and children's interests as a more vulnerable party, then polyamory is really not going to be in that favor. So it was fun to read Mary Harrington's book about feminism against progress, because she addresses this again and again about the imbalance there and the need for it, even to the extent that women, if they do stop taking birth control, then it, in the mind of the woman, raises the stakes of what sexual activity represents and the risks that it poses, and it causes them to be more selective about who they would have sex with. And so they would want to select for somebody who already has met a threshold of being committed, wanting to stay around, wanting to have a degree of love and attachment, and not be physically abusive or something like that. And all of those things, mix in a soup to promote a stabler, healthier life and condition for raising children to the next generation. And so that actually is a good stabilizing sort of thing. And this is, a feminist making an argument for a return to an older position, which is already conveyed in religious terms. It's just without a divine command doing it.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about her to me. I've recommended her so much before, and it's not just because you have to agree with her all the way down. What's interesting about her is the way she went all the way through that Marxist leftism lens to come all the way back around full circle. She didn't back up and come over here to this ideology. Yeah. No, it's
talking.
Right,
I'm going to step away a second.
And but there's that idea, and one of the things Mary Harrington claims, and I don't know if this is true or not, but we don't have to try it out. But one of the things she claims is that if you got rid of the pill so that there was suddenly a risk to sex and that sort of stuff again, you would immediately see all sorts of sadism disappear overnight. You'd immediately see all sorts of cutting and all sorts of those behaviors disappear overnight. She thinks those are types of risky behaviors that are going to happen no matter what. And they used to just be there from just basic sexual relations between the sexes, and they're getting replaced or amped up in these other areas the more that it gets nerfed and safened up. So I had a really weird thing this week that I experienced a real thing in the real world before the crazy internet trend got told to me by the internet trend. I can't go into detail about it. You can maybe guess why, but I can just talk about what it is. It came out on Short Fat Taco, and I had this happen in the real world, multiple situations of people making complaints about this, where there's this thing called Postminors. And I think this goes along with the same sort of thing. And what the post-minor thing is there's all this claim now that it's almost like a little bit pedophilic to date an 18 through a 22-year-old for somebody who's over 30. And it becomes such a thing that there's real fighting and real complaining and real deal thing. I've already dealt with it and a lot of it, and it just came out of nowhere. And right after that, Short Fat Taco made a video of it just this week. And this was after I already experienced, like, this isn't just a weird thing on the internet and weird things people are saying. I think it all definitely stemmed out of, if people remember, like 6 months ago, Leonardo DiCaprio suddenly getting railed for breaking up with women as soon as they turned 25 all the time. And then all of a sudden, a lot of different people wanted to make it, I don't know, like a thing to say this. But I think this actually goes in line with Mary Harrington, and even the thing is, like, what's so weird is these same people would probably argue for consent of a 12-year-old.
Yep.
But then they would also argue, but if somebody's minor coded, you see the word code switching on there, it's also pedophilia to date somebody who's kind of a minor coded 22-year-old. And oh, come on, baby.
Called Jeffrey Epstein by a child, because I once dared to say that it's not grooming for a 21-year-old to have sex with someone in their 30s. Sorry to say, but the dude is kind of right. That age range is very much a yellow light. Some are certainly mature enough to engage in sexual intercourse, but we have different standards. Pro tip, if you're in your 30s, don't fool with post-minors. Post-minors now, guys. That whole extended adolescence thing has gone a bit too far now, hasn't it? You've heard of those pro-pedophile leftists? Well, guess what? Meet the leftists who are so anti-pedophile that they don't want younger adults fucking other adults. People in their 20s are legal adults. If we can join the army, drink and take drugs, pay taxes and have a job, then by God, we can date people who are older. There is nothing wrong with requiring a test in order to be licensed to engage in sex. My whole point is that the post-minor age range has tons of stunted development people, especially neurodivergent people, and this protects them from older predators.
Yeah.
Man, I just had to deal with the line at the DMV. Can you imagine the line at the sex licensing, government-issued sex license?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of the same thing, is like everything needs a therapeutic society. Everything needs, and oh man, therapeutic language. There's so much around polyamory, because I've come across a lot of different women who are getting confronted with polyamory a whole lot, and every time they start complaining to me, I have several different friends who are getting confronted with it. And
when you say confronted, is it that they're in a monogamous relationship
they
and
think
then one
they're
of the partners?
dating, they start dating a person and they think it's like old times. Like, I've just started dating this person, and I assume we're dating like normal people to see if we want to be a official forever monogamous relationship. And then it gets sprung on them, by the way, I'm polyamorous. Are you cool with that? And I've had this happen because we talked about I just heard from one of the ladies today whose husband decided he's polyamorous. But now I'm talking about people who are having it happen on the front end, like on the dating end, and finding out after like the third or fourth date. So it's not really like they're married yet or anything like that, but they also didn't know that they were starting to date somebody who was just assuming that, oh, well, polyamory is just what we do now. But
I'm assuming this means now that yet another disclaimer has to be put on in your dating app profile. No polyamorous.
I bet you would if you didn't, because it seems like these people have had it sprung on them. They didn't know what they're getting into, and there's always therapeutic language with it. There's always, I just had the way I cope and deal with the trauma of my childhood is, there's different coping mechanisms of the way that I'm able to give love and receive love between people. And the upspeak and the self on the shelf.
It's a boundary that I have that you can't stop me from dating other people.
Yeah, and it's just something that I need for my own fulfillment is who I am. So it's not just identity language, but it's also got this therapeutic language with it. And they're dropping it all in right here with this stuff.
That was the thing that struck me as so odd, is that people in demonizing the list of kind of boundary setting that one actor had. I think you guys discussed it a few episodes ago, where I can't remember his name, but the texts from his old girlfriend are now showing up, where he says, no going out with old guys. Yeah, Jonah Hill. No swimsuit shots and things like that. And if these things are, if we're not compatible because of these things, that's fine. No big deal. But so he's trying to do what supposedly therapy would tell you to do, to draw healthy boundaries, set them out ahead of time. But then he gets demonized for it because his boundaries weren't.
Not only that, they said that he co-opted therapeutic language to control the woman. So there was a bunch of people on Twitter who noticed that he was using the therapeutic language, and he must have been using it as a patriarch, using it to exploit the woman and be controlling of her.
What can a guy do? Because if you look at his history, he does have a history of some
genocracy is all you can do.
Of some outbursts and like some emotional volatility. And so it's like, dude, you need to get therapy. Okay, I went and I got therapy.
Yeah.
Learned all about like drawing boundaries and everything. So I'm gonna now apply this in my life. And then this happens, and they're like, dude, you're just misappropriating therapeutic language and your manipulation of women. It's like, I mean, the whole age thing, like if people have brought this up before, but if you start to look at the world purely through power dynamics, then how can, if all men are inherently more powerful than women because of the patriarchy, then there's always going to be a power dynamic play for any relationship. How can celebrities have a relationship? How can anyone who's a high earner have a relationship without it being another high earner? But then there's the whole patriarchy thing. It's just, the further down you go, the more incompatible any sort of human interaction seems to be.
Yeah, everything's pushing towards undoing it. It seems like eugenics again. Let's see. So they say stuff like this is him using therapeutic language, weaponizing. That's the word we like, right? Weaponizing therapeutic language. You're right. We can't do surf social things or develop trust until you consider me and make decisions that give regard to our relationship. I have been vulnerable as possible, and I'm telling you, I am needing you to step up to the plate, which you can, I'm sure of it. But these losers don't get your time if you want me. Straight up, it's consideration. I respect your love of surfing, but I respect myself as well. And your love of surfing and being in those situations and lack of awareness are not mutually exclusive. This isn't me. I have my own issues that I own, my own trauma. if you want marriage and family, you can't use the 25 card. Step up and cut shit. These people don't get your time. He's kind of just repeating himself. But yeah, it's
funny because even the frame weaponizing insert the blank, that itself is part of the toolkit of how you problematize something. You just to use whatever thing someone's using to say, well, you're weaponizing this, and it's like, oh, okay. And that's the part of the whole words are violence kind of trope. But it's one of those things that I think when you do come together in a relationship and your partner has opposite gender friends, I think that quandary does come up in terms of where do those friends fit in the dynamic of your relationship now, because I don't know, things get hairy. And
so I don't think Jonah Hill was doing that, but some of these guys talking these women into polyamorous relationships that they don't want, I think sometimes are actually using weaponizing. I mean, I don't love the word, but they are. They definitely are using it to try to persuade into a sexual situation that.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, I think that women in the ex-Mormon community are particularly vulnerable to this because they've escaped the control of the church and the prison of the church and the values that the church had and the monogamy and everything. They're still kind of vulnerable and trying to figure out what is right for them, what are the rules of social engagement between men and women going forward, and then to have some guy just be like, what, you can love more than one person, you love all your children no matter how many they have. If you're not cool with me dating other people, like that's kind of backwards, and you're basically trying to control me. We don't own each other. We're in a relationship, but that doesn't mean that you own or control me. Are you trying to be controlling? And so it's kind of a Darvo sort of thing where the person who really wants to, minimize commitment, maximize personal gratification, and be able to do whatever they want without, then if anyone does express jealousy, if anyone does express being left out or feeling like their needs are not being fulfilled because energy which could otherwise go into fostering the primary relationship is being diluted into these other relationships, well, they're the bad guy person. So now if they bring it up, then they have to like, oh, I guess I'm just backwards and everything. And it's like, of all the wisdom that you want to hold on to, like understanding that some of the things that get conveyed through the church in terms of the rules and the boundaries of relationships exist in many different traditions because they are the things that promote stability and prosperity in a life and in a relationship. And fidelity and monogamy, those are pretty important.
Yeah. And of course, I just advocate for it just in the level of, nobody's saying what they used to claim of Jordan Peterson of enforced monogamy, although what he was actually saying was something that we are doing, but not actually doing, because the way that it got spun by the left is they thought enforced monogamy was the idea of it needs to be, part of the law or legalized or, enforced. But it's actually the sociological term of shaming people who don't do it. The wider society enforcing the monogamy. You're just saying like, hey, this is what we should do, or coming down on cheaters as a group or that sort of thing. But of course, I mean, if somebody, grown adults, just like, we will ultimately say, hey, be careful of transitioning or whatever. But grown adults, full grown adults, like, I would never put in a law to stop y'all or anything. It's just saying, I think that most people, 99%, maybe there is 1% it works for, but 99%, we've talked about Rob Henderson's luxury beliefs before. And usually they're called a luxury belief because it's really only going to work for people in high luxury who have a lot of options to fall out and don't need to create a full life together where they really put down roots to get things going and take off and just grow together as a couple. If you're somebody who already has the FU money or something like that, it might be easier to be polyamorous. And in this world, how things are and how they probably will be for a long time to be, that monogamy is probably going to get you way further, way further in this world. And but beyond that too, like we said, there's freedoms inside of, you know, you can look up details that most women report much higher orgasms, which means they probably feel safer and freer in fully monogamous relationships. Like them running around having sex with multiple women, it usually isn't how their sexuality works. And that's just one little example of how some restriction creates a freedom, if that makes any sense. But I'm probably preaching to the choir here anyway. Here it is. Screenshots shared on Instagram showcased Hill discussing his relationship boundaries, which Sarah Brady, pro surfer, deemed as misuse of therapy language. So it was the actual gal saying back to him. This incident has ignited a broader discussion on the potential dangers of weaponizing therapy talk and using it to control others.
Hey, you should pull up Zelf on the Shelf did their own list of boundaries for a relationship.
We have that in the a whole list.
Yeah, look on their YouTube feed. I think they posted it as an image on their YouTube feed. You know, we love those guys, Elf on the Shelf. They're like the young whippersnappers that we need to have as a foil. But they recently wrote a comment on the Balenciaga video.
Oh, they did? What did they say?
They finally saw it. They're like, this is amazing. Where are all the women? So that question came up again.
But also, I mean, I do think that sometimes, like when I hear Tanner thinking about stuff, he thinks about it harder than like the average rando.
Yeah, that's the thing, is as much as we like to rip on their takes, they are thinking about it.
A lot of times they drop stuff and I say, you guys are so close to kind of,
yeah, they're so
Mary
close.
Harrington.
Like
You're Mary Harrington around on this stuff, and I bet you could Mary Harrington around on that.
Well, like in the start of their second episode on the Ballard thing, you know, they start out with some kind of insight. They're like, we really got a lot of pushback on our last video, and we're not quite sure what to do with it. And it sounded like, you know, some of the pushback they were learning from, and they talked a bit about some insights they gained from that. But it's just, you know, young people learning still. So
it's one of their shorts.
It's just a screenshot. I mean, it's just a
oh, it's on like one of their screen things.
It's like a post.
They
you know,
put
where
those
you
on
can post just
YouTube?
like an image. I think so.
Oh.
It's like pink.
Yeah, I've seen how they do some of those pink things, but all the recent ones I saw were about zinging on Sound of Freedom stuff.
Tab, then you'll see their feed.
Recently uploaded, watched, unwatched, short for you. Oh, maybe I gotta go into
Click on their
there.
community tab on their main page, and you'll see it a few links down.
It says
what healthy
something-
boundaries look like.
Community, you found it?
Yeah, I can send a link to you if you want. Oh no, they're not.
You can probably upload it on the stream there. Community. Here we go. What? Where is it? Where is it? The Sound of Freedom is all right. I thought God's children weren't for sale.
I sent it to you in the chat here in StreamYard.
I found it right when you sent it to me. Okay.
I haven't read it yet. I just saw they did a list on it. I'm like, well, if they apply their usual wit to it, I'm sure it's entertaining. Just what it says about their take on it, I don't know.
Oh, it looks like it's jokes. Yeah. Don't play any songs that list out the days of the week around me. Come on, man. The Cure. Come on, man. Come on, man. Don't if you. I don't know. Can that song get old?
You know, I didn't put that together. You drew those connections immediately, but I think you're right. And if they are ripping on the Cure, then they're out of my good graces.
Dead. Yep.
Don't try to convince me I might like an IPA. Okay, I'm with them on that.
I also never loved IPAs. Yeah.
Princess Diana Beanie Baby stays facing forward during.
It's pretty funny stuff. Do not get in the elevator with me. Seriously, back the whole elevator, like no elevators with anyone. I've got some pet peeves. I've got some gym pet peeves that I think most people should be able to understand. That one I don't know. Nobody would have that unwritten rule in their head. No elevator. But I have cardio machines. Cardio machines are like urinals. Does that sound like that would be an unwritten rule that maybe you just kind of like sense in the world, that if you're coming up to a row of cardio machines, you should kind of treat it like you're coming up to a urinal?
Yeah.
Like, don't get right next to the person when there's a whole row there.
Dude, there's an intuitive social awareness about that. That was like one of the first viral iPhone apps, was this game where there was like 4 urinals in a row, and every level they would put like a different figure on one of the things, and you had to click on the right urinal to go to. And so sometimes it would be like, if there's just one person and he's at the far, you go to the opposite corner, and that's fine. But if there's 2 people, then you have to figure out which one. So there might be an adult on one and then a child on one skipped over, and you have to find some way to be as far away from the kid as possible. And it's like, you're right, you're totally right. There's an etiquette and a protocol that you should have some intuition about for urinals and for cardio. I agree.
It should be. I mean, you're sweating your head off and all that sort of stuff, and it's fine if you get next to me if that's the last one open, or like you said, there's a mathematics to it that men are probably better at than women. Actually, I saw this whole thing about as far as like spatial stuff. It's one of like the largest category differences in men. There's this test of like liquid that if you draw a picture of a bottle like this and you tilt it like this, you ask where the liquid is right there, that almost all women fail that test and almost all men pass it, of being able to guess where, if you tilt the bottle, where the liquid line will be. And maybe it's the same with cardio machines or something. And guys, we just have a lifetime of urinals, although not 100% of guys pass the urinal test. But
I don't know, maybe women have the same thing with stalls.
Yeah, I wonder. It's not in the Seinfeld one. No spare. Can't spare one square. Let's see.
Well, this just strikes me, though, this meme that they posted here is an attempt to avoid having to take a stance on the issue by just playing it with straight humor.
Yeah.
Because I think Short Fat Otaku did have some valid points about, if you are going to respect the idea of boundaries, and if you want whatever marginalized person to have the access to whatever boundaries they have, and you also have to afford that to any partner in a relationship. And boundaries are by nature arbitrary, and things that somebody may have a sensitivity to are specific to that person. And if they are doing the work of laying out their boundaries ahead of time and doing it in a non-coercive manner that says that, hey, if this is not cool with you, then that's fine. It's just we're not compatible, because incompatibility is one of the things that the early process of dating is supposed to discover. And if somebody's laying out their boundaries like during that phase so that you can determine if you're compatible, those are all things that you're supposed to be doing. And so that, to judge someone as saying, well, your boundaries are inherently oppressive, is like, were they already in a relationship at that point? Are these post hoc boundaries?
Yeah. That's one of the things that we did pull up with Zelf on the Shelf. It was one of their clips. We already mentioned it, but just to repeat it, there was something where they were talking about the polygamy of early Mormonism, and then they said the polyamory of current day polyamorous people is different than the polygamy of early polygamy, because the early polygamy was just men using the women and not doing any of the emotional labor. And then current day polyamory is just because you have so much love to give, and I guess your love abounds. And I don't know. I was just like, okay, like whatever, I think most men are wired for polyamory. Monogamy goes against the impulse. Yes, I think that is totally true. And I mean, technically, if you look at me, my life has been serial monogamy. I mean, you have to admit that if you've been with a lot of different girlfriends or married, it's not polyamory, or it's a different thing. Serial monogamy. Does this mean?
Well, the other thing is that, like, I don't know, looking at things like this polyamory versus monogamy or whatever, and we're talking about it in sort of moralistic terms, but it's like, I don't really look at it as like, if you choose to live your life according to a polyamorous ethic, like, you're not a bad person, you're not a wicked person. I think that old saying that you can make your choices, you can choose what you want, but you can't necessarily choose your consequences, is true. And we're not talking about consequences that are like divine damnation or anything. We're just talking about consequences that exist in the realm of human social interaction. And so when you see things like that classic Arrested Development meme where the David Cross character is like, we could try an open relationship, and she's like, oh, does that really work? And he's like, no, but for us it might.
It just
He's
like,
like, no, it
people
never
are
works.
sometimes so delusional. It never works. So some people are so deluded, they'll delude themselves into thinking.
Yeah.
It'll,
But for us, it might
for us.
work.
And then
Right,
I
mean,
love the thing that was so funny at the time, because that was 12 years ago. And right after he says it, he goes, this is great, but right now we've got a daughter to tell. And he just goes prancing out of the room. And that seems so ridiculous. And that almost doesn't seem ridiculous to me right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. But what I mean is, like, I can see that happening all the time. Like, kids, we have an announcement. And the announcement is we've come to our full identities as a polyamorous couple.
Well, and it plays also, I mean, into like Free Brock, in that episode from Couples Therapy, where the whole well, we need to have an open relationship thing. Just, I went through my own life event with infidelity in my life, and that was the thing that kind of destroyed my world for a period of time. And in doing so, I was connected with a bunch of other people that were kind of working through the family trauma of having been cheated on and things like that. And this whole story of, oh, well, we need to have an open relationship is just like, it's so cliche. It just happens all the time in people who have already stepped out, and they, in facing the possibility of discovery, if they can get an agreement to an open relationship, then suddenly that gives them cover so that they can't be the betrayer or something like that. And that's that's a dimension that I encountered in my own story, as well as
sometimes it's brought up after, so it's likely after the cheating.
I would say it's probably exactly. I think if someone's bringing it up, chances are it's already happened. I mean, that's almost every story. If somebody has already been lying to you about where they're going, who they're spending their time with, if they're already misappropriating funds that are supposed to be part of the community of the family with another person, and then they approach you about the open relationship thing, then things have already gone to a point that stuff is going down. So, and I think that's probably the case that happened in that relationship as well. But it's a sign that there's something that is inherently, not what you think of as the classic traditional relationship, as monogamy and fidelity. So that's probably part of my bias. I admit I do have a bias, but it's a bias born of wisdom and experience, I think.
Mine was too. I haven't talked about it a ton, but I was a young married Mormon guy myself, and I went through the ringer on a lot of those things as well, and a lot of the different ideas of how to make it work and that sort of stuff, and saying after a while, hey, maybe there's these ideas, or maybe we can, and then just go, nope, this ain't gonna work, and let's never ever in our rest of our lives in any situation try to even like tap the subject as an idea for something that could work out, but it might work for you. But but I've only seen it not work. I would safely say I'd have to count them up, but I'd safely say I know of at least 50 situations that started and stopped and didn't stop with the couple together.
Well, anytime I hear someone say that, oh, it works for me, we're doing great, I just imagine somebody who has a picture of somebody up in the air. And it's like, look, this guy can fly. Oh, look, he's flying. He's up in the air. It's like, no, that's a snapshot of somebody who jumped up in the air and they are going to land. And they're not flying. And so it's like, if you meet someone for whom it works, that is great. And the counter argument is always, well, half of monogamous marriages end in divorce anyway. And so I just, I don't know what to say to that other than, it's kind of
it's
like
going to beat the polyamorous rate. It's going to be
that's true. But it's part of this trend that we're seeing of just taking anything that is considered to be an ideal and trashing it and saying that since the ideal isn't perfectly achievable, then you should just throw it away. And it's really noticing this trend started me to really want to recognize the things that are ideals and try to appreciate and show some gratitude for the value of what makes them ideal, and not throw them away because I think that there is some value to them for my own life. And that's kind of the discovery of revisiting some of the things that the church brought into my life. And
Well,
I think
I would say too that a lot of the situations, a lot of them, all of them where I know the person well enough that they shared more than the normal with me, there's regret in it. And sometimes that's regret isn't that they're not still together, but there's still regret that it went down that way. It's like, it almost always kind of goes, well, that all just turned into such a mess. I regret, we should have just gotten a divorce or something like that. But there's regret either way on just whatever on earth happened with all that stuff. And I actually just talked to I didn't even mean for this, but I just talked to 3 different people that have gone through it in the last 24 hours who are still going through different levels of regret with it. I would say if you're feeling, because I've seen once or twice on those ex-Mormon sites, people start mentioning that they want to do it or they're interested in it. They don't even know how to breach it with their wife or some sort of thing like that. Or I've never had sexual relationships out of my marriage. I've seen several times where people put posts like that. And I'll just put something, almost always answer it and be one of the only ones if I see it to say, don't do it. Like, it's grass isn't greener. Don't do it. Stay in the thing. Or if you want out of the thing, get out of the thing. Like, don't go through that route. You know?
But we've seen a new dynamic take place, and that is that, when you express it as an identity, something essential to who you are in your desire to have the open marriage, then if anyone says no or criticizes you or said that's not good, then now we've got the whole tool of ways to respond to that of, well, this is who I am, this is my identity, and you're a bigot for not valuing or appreciating my identity.
Yeah. See what some of these people say. No pill, no abortion will also probably decrease family abuse because abusers couldn't just make it go away. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Oh, I was talking about how Mary Harrington said if you got rid of I don't know if you could hear when you're.
Yeah, I could hear it.
Okay. 25-year-old today are as mature as the 11-year-olds of 7 years ago. There's truth to that. There's one of the things Jonathan Haidt's talked about is that he thinks college should start later. But it's so funny because we currently have, you and I have looked at this a little bit because it came up with the Foucault talking about the age of consent stuff and how age of consent is different in all these different little states. And it's so funny because you have Haidt arguing that maybe kids aren't mature enough nowadays to go to college. Maybe they need still another year or a second year out of high school to go to college. And you think well, society's kind of constantly moving. Foucault would argue, who's to say, what's to say? Because in 1963, 13 was when women were getting married. But maybe society's just taking longer and longer and longer to develop. Is there a moment where it does become that 20 is now the cutoff range because people aren't developed until 20 now? Because that's the way it went and that's the way it'll continue to go.
I think the only reason we have the luxury to be able to do that is because lifespans have been extended so long.
Yeah, but it seems like the development times, like Jonathan Haidt said, these kids at 18 aren't ready for high school.
Yeah.
And the stuff I came across where people were kind of suggesting that stuff, I would look at every one of those teens and they've kind of grown up in a therapeutic society, a nanny society a little bit. And I kind of go, gosh, I couldn't imagine you kids going off to, you do seem kind of young, but at the same time, I can't go enforcing a 27-year-old of not being allowed to ask out somebody and call them a pedophile for it.
Well, that's the safetyism and how it's affected childhood, I think, plays a big role in that. And the church is complicit in that as well by removing the things that were the most challenging, particularly for the young men, in dissolving the scouting program.
Oh, yeah.
And when I think in my own life, there was, the scouting wasn't so much about learning knots because I can barely tie a knot to save my life, even though I'm an Eagle Scout now. I got that square knot down if I happen to not do a granny knot. But it was more about learning about yourself and learning about the hardships that you could confront and overcome and learn about your own strengths and grow and also work with other people and deal with other egos. There's all that learning that goes in as a part of that process that you're learning when you're like a 12-year-old to an 18-year-old. And to the extent that there's this disparity in that the women have in the young women's program, they don't have that same type of trajectory. I think, you can confront that and say, okay, well, there is a disparity there that we want to then start demanding or putting the young women through some more challenging things. But that's probably in today's age going to be met with criticism, because even in the young women's camp, you were split between the young women, and they're like, yeah, we really like being a part of high adventure, like doing these other things, and the other people are like, no, that just really doesn't even go for me. But I feel like it is kind of that going through hardships is part of growing up, and it is the stuff of growing up. And if you're protecting people from hardship during that phase of life where they're supposed to have it, then you're delaying their development. And this is a problem I have. It's just in my own kids and everything, because I was raised to be the provider, and this mindset was instilled in me by my mom that I'm supposed to be the provider, I'm supposed to protect, I'm supposed to do things for. And my story is a little bit different in that I didn't have a dad. My dad died when I was 13 in a car wreck, and so I kind of was just like me. And then I had my mom, but I left for college early, and so I didn't really have that. I just relied on myself. But that same mindset of relying on myself extended into my kids as they grew up. So I ended up doing a lot of things for them. So if their computer didn't work, I would go in and fix it, and I'd have them be with me and everything, but I would be the one that fixed it. And so even though when I grew up, I had to learn, how to do computer stuff because I wanted to play Doom, or because I wanted to, download 8-bit boobies from the thing. Like, there was incentive for me to learn how to do things, and so I had to struggle and learn how to do it. But it just kind of, my kids didn't have that. Is the computer worked, and if it didn't work, we just told dad, and dad got it to work. So there's growth that didn't happen there, and so I think that plays into what we're seeing with this delayed development stuff.
Well, I'd say like the mission was, it was the first time in my life, because I'd had like teachers say I was smart or whatever, but the mission was the first time, like, learning to speak Spanish, that I really realized I've got to learn this thing now because I got to use it tomorrow. And so, like, I cracked down hard, and then realized, oh, I am able to get things. And I think before that, I was kind of just a bit of a jock-headed kid who they said I was smart, but I didn't care enough to try anything or do that hard. And the mission, that overly struggle. I'm not saying go on a mission to become a good studier, but we need something like that. We need something to kind of whip you into shape somewhere.
Well, I mean, actually, I have mixed feelings on the mission, because like, I don't know, if you could get a young man so that he had enough of his own autonomy within himself that he could draw boundaries, say no, do the things that were productive, but also not be subject to the guilt and the manipulation and the pressure that's there, then a mission could actually be like something, an experience. It's just, I don't think that you can get that really in the church before you go out on the mission. And so it just ends up being some sort of weird traumatic thing. But I never went on one, so I can only hear from y'all.
Well, yeah, it's traumatic enough that, like, to this day, I'll still have dreams that I'm on it. And I think every single missionary can repeat that sort of deal. Not to give stuff out. My little nephew's going through a tough time because he got the Dear John. Poor guy. But he's happy. He's getting through it. So,
well, that's the thing. You also need to have your heart broken, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, like, learning how to work through rejection, how to pick yourself up and not let that rejection define your self-worth is, I think, a really important skill. And I had to wait until I was in my 40s to be able to actually go through that process and have that skill.
You never had a heartbreak before, like, your divorce?
No.
What you're saying? Wow.
Correct.
I definitely had gone, in young teenage years, gone through a couple breakups that were so.
No, and I think that was part of why it was so difficult for me to come to terms with what happened in my relationship, was that I had placed all of my worth and my value in what the relationship meant, because I had no conception of self-worth outside of it. And it just made it particularly difficult. Because I kind of gone through this thing where, all the trust that I had in the church was broken as I left it. And the only thing that I really had in my life that I could say that I trusted was my marriage and my relationship with my spouse. And when that trust broke, it it was pretty devastating for me.
Would
And
you
it
say
did-
that did you both leave the church kind of at the same time?
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
And so do you think that played into it somewhat, or not? It would have happened one way or the other.
I think that there are some people for whom the guardrails of the church do minimize the chance that they will act on certain impulses or go down certain pathways that'll present certain temptations for them. And so I think, it probably played a role in that regard.
If I hadn't left the church, I bet you I would still be toughing out being married right now. I bet you it would, like, it did play a huge part of it. But I'm not even saying that was necessarily a bad thing. Just what's bad is just if something needs to end, just end it. Don't.
Well, and in the process of picking up the pieces, rediscovering or discovering for the first time my own self-worth, and reflecting on the dynamics of my relationship that existed from the beginning, from even before proposal and everything, allowed me to confront and name and recognize a lot of dysfunctional personality characteristics that existed in our relationship dynamic, that I think have served as kind of a menu of red flags for myself and for my children to understand as they navigate their own relationships.
Well, what was your turnaround time to feel good dating again?
Let's see, 2014 to 2017, something like that.
Wow,
Before actually considering a real relationship.
So there was that old saying that you had to be out of the relationship at least half as long as the relationship to get past it. But that kind of goes along. I don't know if you ever heard these numbers about age, just two different ideas. But the idea with age is men. Well, I guess it's the same because I saw Leslie here say that she's a 51-year-old who would date a 30-year-old. And does that mean, yes, you're a pedophile, Leslie? No 30-year-old men. No, just kidding. But they say half your age plus 7 years. So if I'm 44, I do 22 plus 7, 29 is my cutoff. It also works like at a younger, if you think of like 23 or 24, half the age, 12 plus 7. Is that better? Yeah, 19, So maybe. Unlicensed sex, what got Winston in trouble in 1984. Yeah. Man.
Part of it.
The criteria is be willing to commit for 18 years to raise potential offspring. Yeah, I think that's at least. Maybe it doesn't have to be for eternity. But I like that. That's one of the things about metaphysics of stuff that I think matters. And it matters if you actually believe it or not. And maybe you can't believe it, but should try to believe it. But I think if you metaphysically believe that your marriage lasts into the eternities, that would pragmatically serve a better purpose than assuming it's just till the baby gets bred, or just until this life is over or something like that. I think putting that metaphysic, whether it's true or not, we'll be Harari and be autistic about it. No, whether it's true or not, I think holding that belief is something that would do well for any couple or any civilization.
The other thing that has been a big learning process, I've mentioned it a few times, is just, we go through our life and you are in that mindset where you are acting in your life as an agent, and the things that you choose and that you do deal with you and how you're going to govern your life and everything. But as you experience more of life, you start to realize that there is more than just the you and the what you're doing. And that is particularly relevant when you start to see your children navigate the transition into adulthood and start their own relationships and have children, when you become a grandparent, or when you encounter death, and when you have to go through whatever process is involved in dealing with the fallout of a death. And you realize that there's aspects of life that extend far beyond just what you are experiencing in the immediate day. And so we leave the church, we start to criticize it, and we demonize all these aspects of it. And if you're doing that and you haven't actually confronted a lot of those aspects of life that exist and are out there, that the church does have some it's played some role. It's done something in its culture that it's conveyed that plays a role in all of those things, and you don't even know. Like if all your kids are young, primary age, and you're going through this, you don't even know what challenges that you'll be faced with in trying to replicate the life that you had, the value and the good things in the life that you had for your children, or give them a fighting chance in that direction. And that is one of the things that hopefully people will start to slow down a little bit in the things that they abandon and how they take it.
Well, I think just
to navigate
even
about this.
being aware of what's lost, because okay, what might be different in your behavior if you assume your relationships for eternity versus you assume it's for life? And you can stop and think about it, that there'd probably be like a lot of different little things that might start changing. It might even be enough little things that'd be a wide gap, because perhaps in the other one, whatever you do in this life, you might be answerable to it at some point or time. It might be revealed or something like it. So you're walking around with that maybe belief in your head or something like that. There's a, if it's true or not or whatever, it's believing it might change some of your behavior, and every little difference in like how far you believe something goes or not. I mean, this is kind of one of the points that I've been arguing with most metaphysics, is anything changes like that, and it might change your actual behaviors of what you know for sure is real in this life. And so, that's what I said on the Midnight Mormons once. Like, I thought their leaders should be true believers. They shouldn't have any sort of pragmatic postmodern believer in there. Anybody who's turning it political, they got to be somebody who actually thinks there's a God there that they're answering to, or you've got a bad leader there. And
there's a dark side to that too, where I've encountered people who are in an existence that few people would choose to remain in a marital situation. But and when you talk to them about it, like, why are you happy with a relationship like this? The response is, well, I just know that in the eternities we won't have these difficulties, and so I can put up with it now, because in the eternities things are going to be so much better. And and so it just kind of, that belief in the eternities can have positive effects, and it can potentially also have negative effects. And
everything's
it's a mixed bag. Yeah.
But it changes. That's all I'm saying, is like the metaphysic you put on stuff. It's one of the deals I bring up with Spengler all the time. And it's not even necessarily saying one's better than the other, because you think of like the Nazi idea of blood and soil or whatever. So they're putting a extra metaphysic on the land that they're in and the people born on that land. Well, that's gotten in our post-World War II world of Nazis something that we just assume is for sure bad and for sure terrible. But if you go throughout all of history, there's been plenty of different tribes and people and that sort of stuff with that same sort of belief, and it helps like gel and bind them together if they sit there thinking of the land as something metaphysically amazing that belongs to them or something like that, and that sort of deal. And so if it suddenly changes into a modernized thing where the land is just utility or something like that, it changes. And the point of it is just that it changes. It's not even just stepping back and looking at it, even without like the normative, idea of it, just thinking, how does it change those people? How does it change how they bind or bond together, or view their land, or view what they might defend, and maybe they defend it too far. But there's so much on one side of it nowadays that just assumes the anti-national side or whatever, that just assumes any of that, or pushes that any of that's just de facto bad and de facto terrible. But they're also dealing with some people who now view it like a Harari, who just says, all I see here is utility and that sort of stuff. And that's the only point of all that, is with so many different atheists, or so many, like Bill Real talks about Harari so much, like idolizing him, is I think that there just needs to be just some awareness on both sides of it, because obviously that metaphysic can be bad, that metaphysic can be good. But there's no just assuming that, like, finding hard truth and just saying, now I've discovered hard truth, that this water is just a utility, it's not a magic lake, is automatically I've gotten to something better. Like that, the magic lake might have served some utility to a people and to caring for it or something like that. And
yeah, and as I'm hearing you describe these things, it reminds me of just examining what are the things that you hold to be sacred and what is the sacredness of that. What is that meaning for it? And it's tied in with gratitude, I think, which I think is an important dimension of how you choose to live your life and whether you see that framing of gratitude as something that is important. And if that is, sublimated into a notion of sacredness, when you leave the church and you have let go of the idea of a divine in imbuing something with sacredness or some prophet person telling you what is sacred, you can still have things in your life that are sacred that reflect those values that you think are of the highest importance in life or in society. And for me, when you're talking about things like imagining that your relationship extends into the eternities, that's a way to conceptualize the idea that the relationship itself is a sacred value in your life. And so if it represents that, then it is something that you want to acknowledge and respect and be grateful for and nurture and give proper care to. And so if that is a high value, then you could see then why entertaining the idea of polyamory or cheating or any of these other things that degrade the sacredness of that value, it kind of gives you a direction in your life. And I think when you start to examine your life and see what are the things that, even if you've let go of the church, what are the things that are still sacred values to you, it can still give you a direction that if you don't take the time to really drill down and explore, you may not have, because you're going to be hit with all kinds of philosophies and all kinds of ideas about what you should do, how you should think about things. And it helps to have examined and continue to examine your values for that.
Yeah, so that kind of brings back around all the way back to Mary Harrington, because you mentioned it today because you said you just finished the book, and I read it like a month ago, so if I remember right. But one of the interesting things about her, like we said, is she comes through leftism, but all the way through leftism and lands almost all the way back, almost all the way to a trad wife, if that makes sense. And somebody mentioned trad wives here. It's not all the way there, but she's almost arguing for that. And but she comes
well
through
what's the difference? Because a trad wife would be someone who's LARPing a little bit. They're like, I'm going to play this role, but she takes those values and sees them as a foundation for her life, not as a make-believe or play, but as a sincere expression of how she sees a good life to be lived for an individual and a society.
Yeah, but she comes through this critique, like you said earlier. It's a Marxist critique. She uses a Marxist critique of materialism, and some of that, it goes. We talked about Heidegger. It's a little bit some of the same things. She talks about how the change of viewing things in a modernistic factory way started to view women differently. It started to not view women as mothers, view them as something that should be automatons that can go to work, or reified as something different than a mother. Reification is a word that comes from Marxism. Lukács probably did it more than Marx, but it talks about you get reified as your job position. Like Jonathan here is a doctor, and I'm an HR director. Marxism, they call that bad, that you reify that as your personality. But one of the things that they'll especially complain about is like a woman should be maybe a cubicle worker or something, like not a mother. Like you got to go get reified. So she takes the Marxist criticism seriously of that. She goes all the way like, you're trying to reify me into a working cog rather than this living being or this entity that means more than just something that can make your line go up. And then she also talks about how the stripping away of all those sorts of things, the material conditions, part of the material conditions is part of what caused feminism. So that's a little bit of a Marxist critique of saying the material conditions, it wasn't just the ideology, the material conditions also created the idea for these women to start, bantering out and deciding that their meaning or their purpose is more or should be this other thing. But
that was contingent on people looking at society in economic terms and saying you're only really a person if you've entered the marketplace. And so if women are domestic and in the home, they haven't entered the marketplace, so they aren't actualized people. And so as soon as the mindset of women everywhere was that this domestic life is not actually personhood, in order to have personhood, we have to enter the marketplace so that we can participate in the market economy. That is a complete sea change in then what follows thereafter about what women can or should choose for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's looking at it from all that sorts of stuff, and you would think, obviously, I think she hits a conclusion that sometimes I've wondered, from our friends from Les, if you listen to Zelf on the Shelf a whole lot, they'll talk about it. They'll talk about climate change and all this climate change stuff, and they'll stop and they'll kind of have this bit of aporia that's saying, well, it sure seems like that benefits the super rich companies, mega companies too. But whatever sort of thing like that. But she goes all the way down the route of saying, hey, my Marxist critique says you're trying to strip my womanhood from me. You're trying to make womanhood seem like it should be manhood or working automaton bot, not something else. And you guys are changing the ideas and lying somewhat about the past of what a woman's role in society was, or how they were intellectual beings in their own right in that previous world before you were supposed to go be an office cog or something like that. There was plenty of spaces where female persuasion and intellectual conversation happened. That's one of the things Camille Poggi has always brought up too, and it's kind of just been like an erasing of history to talk about that stuff. But there is a way to go all the way through the Marxist critique to say you stripping me of my trad wifeness was for your factory and not for my good. And
not only for your factory, but for your sexual gratification, for your consequence-free sex, for your ability to have no obligation to the women that you encounter in your life. And it kind of is making the case at one point that it is all to the benefit of men and their desires or their proclivities, which may be evolutionarily programmed, but there it is. But then she goes into a bit of how it's changed men as well, and how the life of men, the satisfaction, the stability that they may enjoy, has been significantly altered just by how the relationship dynamic, how men and women would in the past have come together and built a life together, has been so radically transformed by this new, what does she call it, meat Lego Gnosticism, where rather than seeing men and women as possessing unique and complementary characteristics that should be identified and respected and society should acknowledge, we see them as persons. And it's a Rousseauian idea that there's these persons that exist rather than men and women who are both unique. But these persons are bodies that can be, plugged into as meat Legos into any role. And we just have to see that that's the way a truly egalitarian society should be. And so if a woman says, well, I don't necessarily want to have promiscuous sex with as many people as possible, well, they're not acting in the way that, because men want to have promiscuous sex with as many people as they can. And then it extends to all different facets of society. But since that idea of the meat Lego doesn't comport with reality, then what you end up with is all these different distortions and things that are interrupting and disrupting the very coming together of men and women to pass on in a stable, procreative way society and our structures to the next generation. Because ultimately, as a society, we still have to do that. You can look out at the skyscrapers of New York City and you can just say, in 80, 90 years, there's going to be a completely different set of people inhabiting, possessing, and conveying that property into the future. And somehow we've got to preserve the structures of society that facilitate all of those things, because it is kind of a living organism that has things that are required in order to keep it up. And that, that exists at a family level, it exists at a city, a metropolitan, and a national level. And I think that people like Mary that are putting their finger on some of these trends in society, pointing out to how they're getting in the way of that replication of society, are important voices to listen to.
Yeah, and like I said, I think, well, I mean, obviously, it's not very often that you can have somebody who comes from that edge of the world stop and listen to somebody, even if they've come around those ideas. But I mean, one of the books I've brought up a million times before is Mark Fisher's Capital Realism, and that's one of the books that you can go through Marxism to land on. I guess it's capitalism, and you can give it to your Marxist friend and have them go, yeah, I see this. So it's like you can get to the same place, but from the other side of the trail on the other side of the mountain, if that makes any sort of sense. But and it's a little...
Sear Stoner is asking, what do you mean it doesn't comport to reality? And I think when I say that, what I'm saying is that you can say that men and women are interchangeable and that there's no differences from them. You know, other than minor physical differences, the psychology, the interests, the proclivities, the choices, there's no inherent difference to them. But that is not reality. The reality is that there are differences in how men and women, the choices that they make, the things that they would prioritize, the approach that they have to those things. This is not to say that you should make a generalization about any individual man or woman, but that you can acknowledge that in aggregate, there are going to be trends that are different, and you shouldn't expect them to be the same. This is a data point that comes up when people point out that in Finland and other societies where most of the stigma that or barriers that would exist for differences of gender in terms of what professions that they choose or anything, the differences in the genders don't disappear as you might expect that they would, but they in some cases become even more stark.
And that will only be true for a matter of time before the current day researchers p-hack that out of existence. Yeah. But for right now, it's true because it's true. You shared this. I don't know if last time I tried to play TikTok on here, I think TikTok had its thing going where it was being not compatible stuff, but maybe this will play. But slowly training myself to not think of feminine things that I love as silly or unimportant.
Feel.
Now here's the question. Who is it that told women that feminine things that they love are silly or unimportant?
Mm-hmm. Wearing bows in her hair is unserious, and feeling pretty with glitter on her eyes is petty. I love this era of unabashed femininity, and I hope it never ends. But you mentioned that, like, maybe we got Mary Harrington, but maybe the Barbie movie also might play into this a little bit, because it's like a some sort of feminist message, but now it's all of a sudden cool to be bimbo kino again, as Brittany Venti called it.
Now you can listen to people break down the history of feminism, because you can say feminism this or feminism that, but there have been different movements within feminism that are so at odds with each other that they are completely different entities. And so you can look at the history of feminism and find a time where the most influential advocates of that particular wave of feminism would say things like that women should not be allowed to choose to be traditional mothers and housewives, but they should be compelled to be in the workplace. And that was one notion of that. And there's another moment in femininity where they say, yes, we're all for equality and for everything, but that means that if a woman does value and prioritize being a traditional mother in a monogamous relationship, in a nuclear family, that is no less or more valid than any other choice a woman might make for their life. And when those two mindsets clash, then you can start to see the stark differences between different forms of feminism. But what we saw in that TikTok was kind of a move back to say, hey, all of these things that a certain type of feminism may say is degrading or wrong, I want to claim for and have it be part of my femininity, and not be ashamed of it or denigrated for it. And the fact of the matter is that femininity it interacts with the men in the lives of those women in ways that they may actually see as part of the natural coming together of men and women to start to form relationships. Because I can tell you, as men, if my experience is universal, there are aspects of femininity that are very attractive. and very appealing, and are more inclined to engage me in wanting to foster and form a relationship.
I would say the stuff in that video is dang near universal. Like there's some parts of like feminine behavior that's almost kind of universal in women that almost all men can go, oh, why are you gonna be this way? But like the stuff of being cutesy and your pink cake and that you like your Barbie and all that whatever stuff, I can't picture. There's probably a few, but I can't picture very much guys saying like, geez, don't be that, or we don't like that, or something like that.
Well, I draw a line at the Japanese childlike voice.
Oh yeah.
No, but you know, these are all subjective things.
That's one of the things that plays in that Postminor stuff, which is one of the things you told me about forever ago. All those ideas of having some sort of anime of a thing that looks young, but you say in the anime that the thing is looks and sounds young, but you say in the anime that the thing is 1,000 years old or something like that. But it's a minor thing.
Yeah, the thing is, some of the stuff he talked about minor coding there, I think, is stuff that people probably include or play with, at least in order to depict things that are meant to appeal to people who perhaps are a little bit in the pedo side of things. But Christopher Rice in the comments is pointing out that cutesy and pink and Barbies isn't universal for women, and that's absolutely true. And anytime any of these broad statements about what a woman is and what a woman shouldn't be comes up, it's like, okay, we understand, like, the point is not that a woman should be one thing or the other, but the point is that women should be free to be anything, including the things that are, stereotypical women. And that does really center more on kind of the libertarian individuality notion of it.
Yeah. I missed some of these. They usually comment more on these. Let me show you something that can go wrong with men according to mainstream TV shows. I think it's on this one.
Oh, this is a TV show, I guess? Damn. I wonder what show it is. Why is this why'd you guys send me this?
There's been a shooting.
This is a show my dad would watch.
You've had quite a day.
Damn. Look at this guy.
Does that feminoid have to be?
Did you hear what he said?
What did he say?
He said, does that feminoid have to be here?
Feminoid.
That feminoid, that foid.
Void.
Tell her to get out.
Oh my god, this is like an incel.
Okay, you're gonna treat Miss Curry with respect.
Respect, and you don't get to decide who's in this room or isn't.
Femoids.
Why don't you tell me what happened this morning?
Stacy got what she deserved.
Stacy?
A cop.
What?
Stacey?
Oh my god. It isn't.
They are in control. They have sex whenever they want it.
Whenever they want it. No matter what you, they deny me.
This poor nice guy.
I deserve love.
What the
fuck? They don't give it to me. They only give it to those shallow, stupid alphas.
Oh no, guys, the alphas.
I'm 28 years old and I'm still a virgin.
Like, this is a good looking dude. This is the wrong guy to hire for this.
I will slaughter them.
Hollywood.
I am the true alpha male.
Oh.
And I will make them pay.
You gotta be a Sigma. Man, I don't know why they had to play multiple music tracks during that thing. That was fucking annoying.
Oh, man.
Well, it's funny because Mary Harrington actually puts the incels up against kind of the radical feminists in her book as both sides of where the meat Lego Gnosticism leads to, in that it disrupts the coming together of the sexes so much that you have these men who are porn addled that have these distorted views of what women relationships are, and then you have the marketplace of bodies that's out there facilitated by social media and dating apps, where it's only the top 1% of men that are pursued by like 80% of the women or something like that. And that, it's kind of just the disconnection on both of those sides that is causing some
Yeah,
of
it's
this
connected
breakdown.
for sure. It's not connected at all.
But like, how widespread is that degree of inceldom? You know, because like I can understand men feeling disenfranchised in our current cultural moment, but I see what I think are caricatures of the incel Mugatao thing, and I just see these as like niche corners of the internet. I don't know how widespread they are. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's niche. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, red pill's not so niche anymore. That's getting so huge, you know. But MGTOW's still pretty niche, and you'll hear every opinion in the world on MGTOW inside of the red pill world. And sometimes nobody dunks harder on the MGTOW people than the people who are the red pillars. And then,
So
I don't
red
know.
pillars are trying to be realistic about what's happening to society, but they haven't given up on it.
They haven't given up, but they also, you know, kind of like Andrew Tate stuff. Did you see the post by Andrew Tate? Let me pull this up because even Dan McClellan commented on it. Let me show you this post. Dan McClellan. Check out this post. This is the one that had go all viral this week. Andrew Tate's almost kind of, well, I mean, he is Islamic now, but he's just kind of like pushing almost kind of this Nietzschean man.
Hey, what do you mean he is Islamic now? He converted?
Yeah, he converted. He converted to Islam, but although some people think there's ulterior motive to it because he needed ulterior money lines. Like he had his money frozen in the West, like Nigel Farage did, if you followed any of that. But then if he goes and converts to Islam, then you can go through Saudi Arabian channels. And they say that actually might be something you'll see happen a whole lot in that world, because not only can you then use that's a route to a secondary economy or use of money, but then also in that world, there's this actually, I guess, came from some Islamic thing. It says women are born with innate power, a form of magic, but every time somebody fucks them, they give some away. He takes it. And that's why the most powerful men have slept with endless women, and the least magical women have slept with endless men. And I guess that comes from some sort of a old saying somewhere. And Dan McClellan goes, of course, Omen 1 from Tablet 104 of the ancient Mesopotamian Summa Alu explains that if the woman is on top, she takes his power and he loses his vitality, literally personal God for a month. Sounds like somebody's falling behind on their reading of Iron Age sexual politics. But yeah, I guess it came from some Iron Age sort of deal or something like that. But he got dunked on by Dan McClellan. But there's some level of red pill stuff who are kind of saying live that Andrew Tate life. You know what I mean? Like get realistic about how women are and how they view you. Maybe deracinate or detach your mythological or idealism. If you remember when we were talking about Schopenhauer or whatever, like you have this ideal view of a woman. That's what tricks you into continuing nature. The red pillars are kind of saying, no, let's look at this almost in a Harari way, if that makes sense, but just say we can game it. We can game it if we look at it autistically, if that makes sense. That's how it
sounds like
we can game it if we look at it autistically. Yeah.
It sounds like the pickup artist analysis that exists out there, where they see, you know, and Harrington described or gives some lip service to this, where women control sexual access and men, or sexual resources, and men control economic resources. And so the marketplace of those two coming together places women at their prime in their 20s and men at their prime in their 50s, 40s, and 50s. And so those are the forces that drive social interaction, you know, just along both of those different bell curves as they come together. And so
yeah, it's almost exactly like the pickup artist stuff, except pickup artist stuff was just for the goal of picking up. So this is like for life. How do you keep, to use a Seinfeld term, hand in the relationship? How do you how do you game the evil psyche of the situation to always keep keep face or something like that forever? But it doesn't like discourage relationships or whatever. It almost kind of like talks about, you know, gaming the human bot that we are, or something like that, getting realistic about it. And I I'd say, I mean, yeah, that's kind of how I'd describe it. But that doesn't mean that all of them, because like one of the most famous ones, Rollo Tomasi. That guy's married, been married 20 something years, has a daughter, gone to college, you know, sent her to college, all that sorts of stuff. And you might think from the stuff that he writes that he would be a totally different person than that, you know what I mean? But he would advise most young men to be very, very wary or cautious of whatever situations for their own Nietzschean, you know, will to power type stuff, if that makes any sense. It's like a realism. It's almost like political realism in the sexual marketplace. Take out your idealism, be a realist type deal.
When Harrington's describing this problem in our society, she mentions that you know, this is going to give rise to mentors. Like, what are the types of mentors that are going to arise to give meaning to the men who feel disenfranchised in this way? And so you kind of have at two ends of the spectrum, the Andrew Tate and the Jordan Peterson, who are both figures that have been named as having significant influence for men. What's your take on, like, what is the difference there? Like, if you encounter somebody who's a Jordan Peterson follower, are they also going to be Andrew Tate followers, or is that incompatible?
No, I think
Why?
like some people, you've seen some of those memes of what's your way, Western man, and they'll show one end as Andrew Tate and one end as Jordan Peterson or something like that. And then of course some people will be like, ew, both of them, or that sort of deal. But I mean, I think what men really should do is not look for single mentors. I think they should look for many mentors in many different ways. And some of the ideas, you're just taking what the idea is, because this is the truth about me, is I believe in some idealism and I listen to a lot of realists. So I listen to the critiques from the realists, if that makes sense. Like I listen to the critiques of, I use the word autist, but I kind of mean something specific with that. Some people can take offense to it, but I don't mean it offensively. I mean it like you view stuff over systematized, you view it over patternized, and you almost like eliminate any of that sort of a metaphysical spirit of any sort of thing, and you view it as a bot and an automaton that's going to do it. It's almost a little bit like determinism, you know. But they're not wrong. The same way some determinists are not wrong. It's not wrong that we're stuck in our meat bodies and all of us are going to tend to do what people in these meat bodies are going to tend to do on average or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's worth listening to all the realists. It's worth listening to the realists in politics and all that sorts of stuff. And it's worth listening to them because your idealism needs to be curbed off. It needs to be curbed off here and there somewhere. You need to be ready to change it or go off somewhere else, not be so idealistic that you think that you're going to create a utopia on this planet, or that you're so idealistic that you, I don't know, view some woman as the ultimate pedestal thing or something like that. But I do think you got to keep that idealism in there a little bit. I think you can't go all the way Harari, and but I listen to the Hararis, if that makes sense. That's and so a lot of that red pill stuff is telling you to be real and think realistically and all that sorts of stuff. But I think if you want an ultimate happy life, you got to do a little bit of the Schopenhauer. We're gonna fantasize. We're gonna put an overlay of something highly metaphysical to the situation that's more than just bots mating. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I do like your idea of not relying on any one single mentor and having a lot of different people that you listen to. I don't know. It kind of feels like there's this impulse that I have whenever I encounter a difficulty or a challenge, whether it was leaving the church or going through my own issues with my marriage, which was trying to find other people going through the same thing and trying to learn from their mistakes and trying to see their perspectives, see what other things are. And that's where like in-person community becomes, I think, an important value that when you leave the church, you lose a little bit. And finding replacements for that has been sort of difficult. You know, we naturally gravitate to what we have access to in the most convenient way, which is this social media stuff. And, you know, even the Porch Time has a little bit of a community going on in the chat every once in a while, as we've seen with other stuff. But have you found any source of that type of mentorship?
I haven't found great community. Mentorship's probably us, and this you're a mentor. You're for sure a mentor on internet, YouTube type stuff, and all the different deals and the ways you take it and talk with it, and that you've been through hellfire. You've been through the real hellfire of cancellations and all that sorts of stuff. I've dodged whatever that is, and it's probably just because I don't have any sort of level of fame to actually be canceled. But I can't imagine having actually gone through a real one. And anybody who's been through that is somebody who can absolutely mentor me, like what goes through that, and then just how to deal with some how to stream, how to talk about that stuff, and how to look at all these different things, but from a different viewpoint. But then I have mentors in the gym world. I have a trainer. I still talk to him here and there. I don't need him anymore. I still take guitar lessons. I've been playing guitar for 30 years, and the kid I take guitar lessons from is younger than me, and boy does he wail. You know what I mean? But he's teaching me a type of kind of country guitar that it's a little foreign to me, but I'm getting like a whole lot better at it, and I plan on being top notch at it. But you can find a mentor anywhere. I mean, some of my friends, a lot of my different friends are mentors. But when I'm looking at like I think everybody, like they say, everybody can teach you something. Everybody knows a whole lot about something that I don't know about, and they can help me with that. But if we're talking about the world of, I don't know, online famous people, I mean, Peterson was great, but Peterson's not the end all to me either. Who he's just got like a lot of different little tidbits. I always kind of, strangely enough, viewed Peterson more as like a Malcolm Gladwell type, although Malcolm Gladwell's fallen off for me. But what I mean is, like, he was somebody who accumulated a lot of different other people for you, and so you could jump off of him to learn all these other people's ideas. And I like people like that. I like people who know a lot of different people, if that makes sense. So it's almost kind of like any mentor I find is a whole lot of different ideas in themselves, if that makes any sense. The people that
I think it helps not hitching your boat up to one single mentor and looking at different people. I think like a lot of people really put Sam Harris on a pedestal for a long time. They're like, this guy gets it. He's atheist. It's all rational. It's all based on, legitimate, scientific, credible stuff. And then they started to see where that could go if somebody only sees their own perspective as being valid and doesn't give any space for other perspectives on things. But if you have him and a bunch of other people in who you're listening to or following or considering the comments of, then it gives you a little bit of freedom to diverge from a particular person, because you haven't joined the cult of Jordan Peterson or something. Then you can disagree when you think it's reasonable to disagree with them. For example, on anonymity is one that a lot of people finally found a reason to disagree with him on. And it's in those disagreements that I think we learn a lot about ourselves and different perspectives. So it really is listening to the critics again that becomes important, just as it was in our journey with the church and waking up from whatever wokeness filled the hole that was left when we left the church.
Who do you see as a mentor still?
Well, I mean, I think for me, in my whole journey, I developed a pretty good friendship with an old retired police sergeant in my community. We connected over the Ron Paul presidential campaign in the Libertarian group, and he was just like he's an older guy. He's just like a good old boy, and he just became kind of sort of a father figure for me. But he's one of these old military people that doesn't care a lick about what anyone else says, and so he's always been kind of a pretty stable rock for me to bounce my ideas off of. And he went through so much listening as I went through my whole family issues over the past decade. And so that, I mean, having that in-person connection was really important for me. And then, there are a couple of other things that I learned from just listening to their voice. If you consider a book to be kind of having a connection to somebody's mind in the past, then certainly, certain authors that I was introduced to in following Ron Paul So like Mises and Hayek and Ayn Rand, actually. All of those minds are things that I feel like I learned a great deal from. And that kind of prepared me to be a little bit skeptical of some of the things, because my departure from Mormonism wasn't so much purely historical contradiction or purely the lens of social justice. It was more of the lens of kind of individual rights, and what I saw as more of a kind of a Western liberal ethic, and so that kind of just put me in a different place than many other people that I found myself hanging out with in the ex-Mormon world. And so when certain things came along, it was harder for me to go along in those directions, just because I think why you leave the church has a great deal of bearing on where you go thereafter. And so I don't know. I think that impulse to not really idolize or put any one particular person or one particular group on a pedestal still is pretty strong with me. So I don't know that I want to put all my...
I'm also actually kind of pretty slow to decide I dislike something. Like I read a lot of Foucault before I decided I dislike Foucault, and there's certain opinions I have on certain people that came pretty dang slow, and even then with them I can rescue some of their ideas, and I always feel like I can do that with almost anybody. Actually, just even the way Mary Harrington was rescuing some Marx, because I've always been thoroughly unimpressed with Marx, just thoroughly unimpressed. But you can kind of say, well, that sort of reification stuff and that like turning bodies into cogs, you can, but at the same time too, you can say Marx certainly wasn't the only person who came up with that idea. But there's a lot of different people that like I read them and I just love them, and I don't agree all the way. Like Nietzsche's just, but I don't agree all the way like with Nietzsche or that sort of deal. And like just like you said, I can view them as mentors. Dostoevsky, like totally. But one of my favorite authors of all time, it turns out he's a crazy Marxist, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But reading Cormac McCarthy, we brought up like a whole lot lately. But one of the oh gosh, what was I going to say? Going with like books and I spend a lot of time also reading with things I disagree with. Oh, but I was also going to say like Rollo Tomasi, people like that like get like a bad name or something like that. Rollo Tomasi's like not wrong. If people go listen to him, he's got a lot of points that's worth taking in and thinking about. And some of his criticisms are against Peterson, but some of his criticisms are against like leftism and wokeness and stuff. The guy's just really hardcore about kind of maybe stepping back and viewing humans as a realist, like, and that's not wrong. I do think that you've also got to swill in some idealism there. Like I saw Savvy D mention Depeche Mode song "Lie to Me" a little bit. I think that's a good comment, because I mean it's just true. Like I think you do gotta build sandcastles in your head a little bit. It can't be all realism. That's why I call Harari kind of a sociopath, because I think he's trying to turn everything into pure realism. And
I sent you a picture in the private chat. Can you pull it up?
The Reddit one?
No, here in StreamYard. Yeah, the Reddit.
Yeah, I got it. Just let me.
This is something that I had been trying to come up with a metaphor for how I consider ideals for a while, dealing with the idea that we've never actually seen a true circle. And yet we know a circle exists, and we design things around circles. We understand things around circles. They're something that we depend on for many different physical aspects of our life, but we've never actually seen, no one has ever seen an actual circle. And so this is kind of just the physical representation about this, is that we've also never seen a perfect sphere. And this is an example of the closest that we have to a perfect sphere. But even if you blow it up to the size of the Earth, there's going to be a difference of 3 to 5 meters between its highest point and its lowest point. And yet we all still understand and appreciate the value of the concept of a sphere. And
so that's still not perfect.
Right. It's still not perfect. So it's kind of one of the ways that, if I do find something that I think is worthy of holding up as an ideal in my life, it doesn't have to be perfect in the way that it actually exists in life. We would all like our relationships to be perfect, but they're just never going to be perfect. And so understanding that there's still something to pursue or to deal with things that have certain degrees of imperfection is, I think, an important way of dealing with other imperfect humans. And I just thought it was a fun little image to have, because I always wondered if we ever
and
had
that's
a
totally
perfect
right.
sphere.
Because there's so much talk about truth since the Peterson debate, but we saw Jacob and Bill Real talk about it, and Bill just barely kind of went back at Thoughtful Saints just like yesterday, saying like, how do you know that your stuff doesn't work for Jehovah's Witnesses and all that sort of deal. And so much of what I'm talking and thinking about is just ultimately Chesterton's fence. Somebody brought it up earlier, just being cautious with your metaphysical beliefs versus your real beliefs, and not thinking that just sheer realism is the total answer, or you can even be a complete bot like that. Even if you wanted to, even if you decided that's the route to do, you're still accidentally getting metaphysical and magical. I mean, one of the things I frequently bring up is poker. I'll take any one of you to play poker with me for any little time. Before long, you're going to give me some little story that's magical, that's some sort of magical feeling or some sort of magical thing happened. You want to know what? There's probably like a realism answer to that thing or something like that. But I don't care how atheistic you are, little bit of poker and I will have you talking about gods. You know what I mean? Or just today, like John Larson said something about, some lady corrected him, and because she corrected him, obviously he accepted the criticism, because the criticism said, you should have realized that I was a leftist. Oh, I'm so sorry. See, this is the way you correct me, he says. But anyway, he sends her blessings. I send you blessings. I send you blessings. Like, okay, so it never takes that much for people to get metaphysical. And even though you can say there's a realism thing. So what I'm saying is just there's a level of it too that even if you wanted to be fully realism, whatever guy, you're not pulling it off. But then there's the other level of Adorno, both Adorno from the left, Spengler and Heidegger from the right, all the way up through Carl Sagan, the science explainer. They all said that you have to beware of thinking that you're free of all metaphysics or you're free of all myth, because you are the exact person who gets the hardest to point out and say to you that you are believing in a myth somewhere. Unless you embrace and realize that you're somebody who's capable and even doing it somewhere, you're going to be the worst one. And I agree.
Well, that's
with all of
another dimension to this sphere. Is in another sense, this sphere represents utopia, or at least a pure sphere represents utopia. And this sphere is an attempt to achieve that utopia. And you will never achieve the utopia. But in the meantime, you have to cut down all of the different variety of life, all the different personalities that you have, and shave them all off so that you can get to the perfect utopia. And it just doesn't reflect the broad variety of humanity. It was one of the learning processes I had to go to, because I think when you first explore libertarianism and you get steeped in these ideas of natural law and individual liberty and human rights and how they all come together, you start to listen to people who advocate for some sort of libertarian ideal society. But when you see how that plays out and different people have different visions of it, and it's just, I don't know, I got to the point where it's, for me, it's not that there's a perfect society, but a society in which people can argue about what is a perfect society is good enough for me. Like, I just want the freedom to argue about that.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of those different philosophies with a utopian vision, where that utopian vision means that you can no longer argue about what the free society is. And so I just kind of want a space in which that discussion can be held.
I agree.
And I just
That's
don't know what the right
100%
vision is.
And part of that society, to answer kind of Bill Real's question, like what's the difference between Hobbes and Morton's, is I want a society where both of them can exist. There's always the worry of like, where's something causing harm, or can they let people out more graciously if people want out or something like that. But
yeah, that's
unless
why I
you-
worry in this ex-religious, post-religious world, when you start to see people who say, well, religion should not be legal and people should not be able to, you know, they shouldn't exist. And, you know, that religion kind of being the canary in the coal mine of personal freedom, you want a society in which religions can exist.
Yeah, I mean, almost always is. Like you go back to Mao, and the very first thing that happened as soon as he was able to get rid of all the religions is that's when the state really shoots off the.
Speaking of which, Benjamin Boyce had an interview with.
I saw
G. Van
the
Fleet.
I saw the advertisement of it. I haven't watched it yet, though.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it, but it's a great breakdown, and she kind of is going over the history that I went over with Dr. Payne in terms of the lead up to and the events of the Cultural Revolution.
Everybody go
and
watch
some of the
Jonathan's
parallels.
Cultural Revolution post. He's got like a good dozen or more of them, and they're all worth knowing about because you're living through a cultural revolution right now. A little bit. A revolution where all the same people stay in power. Revolution. There's the Depeche Mode one. Depeche Mode one, Lie to Me, Enjoy the Silence is a great song. Oh, they're talking about Depeche Mode. Didn't they just come out with a new album? I haven't even listened.
They did actually. They're touring as well, even though I think they had a member die.
Is the new album good? I haven't listened to the new album.
I listened to the single and it was surprisingly catchy, but it hasn't really gripped me like I guess
I gotta check
recent
that out tonight.
loves of Glass Animals and Muse. So
Sinead O'Connor just passed, and
that one stung absolutely.
Mhm.
That was one of my early posts back when I was blogging was reflections on her ripping up the picture of the Pope.
Take the good and the bad. In most cases, sometimes Cenk Uygur makes decent points. It happened. Well, Anna and him are frequently they have this turn going on in their lives too, where they're suddenly like standing up to different.
So that's one of the things that
ideology, all that stuff.
with few exceptions, even people that appear to stand for everything that really, really annoys me, if I listen with an open mind and try to just even try to give them some humanity, then I'll find some good points that they make. And sometimes that requires me to be like, this guy's really coming after me on Facebook or whatever. Let me just check out his profile. And then you see like he's got some kids, he's got a family, he's got some interests. And so then it just kind of softens the reflex that I have to demonize and dehumanize him. And,
well, there's all sorts of times. Oh, good. Yeah,
no, that's just the observation in terms of it's hard even for the political foes I have to fight that impulse to see them as the baddie.
There's all sorts of, because I spend a lot of time listening to what I don't like or disagree with, and from both sides, like all over, and there's all sorts of times where something I would say that this little speech right here and this whole thing these guys said is the dumbest thing I've ever said, and but there was 10-15 minutes that was talked right there. And then 2 days later, I'll find myself regurgitating something that I heard from that same speech, and I'll be like, yeah, so it's not like I'm getting zero from it, you know what I mean? Because there's something in there that even if I decided at the end of it that was stupid, I still pulled something out of that that's
even if it's a counterfactual example.
Yeah, exactly. But there was Zizek gave some little speech about coffee, and this is totally like Derridian. And it doesn't sound meaningful at all, but I like it because it still sounds meaningful. But this is the same way that those people make non-meaningful things sound meaningful. And he's talking about coffee, and this person goes to a coffee shop and says, "I would like coffee, hold the cream." And the waitress says, "We don't have cream." And he goes, "Yeah, but I don't want the cream." He's like, "Yeah, but we don't have cream." And he goes, What do you have? I have milk." He says, "Okay, I'd like coffee, hold the milk." "Oh, okay, I can get you some coffee." And I don't know. That doesn't mean anything. That in Derridian world, they always kind of pull things like that of some sort of like negative thing like that. Seems like this must mean something. Thinking about that sort of deal, and I like the dumb little story, and it means nothing. And but
it gives you insight into people who just want to distinguish themselves by saying what they don't want.
That's totally the point too. But then the same times too, if anybody's writing songs out there or anything like that, they those sorts of little ideas are always great for lyrics too. At the same time, it's called antithesis and all that sort of deal. Republicans have the Trump derangement.
What do you think of this
Alfie
UFO thing that is coming out?
I think 100% something that I saw on James Lindsay's Twitter that somebody else had said. I guess I got the post right here. I'll just pull it up because I've already got it. I think it's complete bullcrap. Nothing.
I think I know
new.
which one you're. I think I know which one you're pulling up, and it's kind of like in the anti-war libertarian world. It's like, oh, we're gonna make it. We always have to have an enemy because the enemy and the conflict with the enemy, or the potential conflict with the enemy, is the fuel for the military-industrial complex. It's the justification for funding, the machinery of war.
Totally.
And now that we have a new branch of the military, well,
yeah,
how much more expensive is it going to be to fund designing weapons for space than it was to build a tank?
That's totally.
And if we don't have any enemies, then it's like, well, what's the point? We could justify Star Wars because we had an enemy here on Earth that we wanted to fund a pie in the sky project for, but this is so much better.
I'll read because I didn't have the exact. I think I sent it somewhere else, but this is what one of the ladies said. Is she said, if you think the imminent massive increase in the Space Force budget will be used to deal with these alleged UFOs and not to build a satellite surveillance grid to power the digital ID CBDC technocracy to control everybody, you might be really gullible. I see a lot of people everywhere believe in aliens. Believe whatever you want. My point is this is happening in Congress right now for a specific purpose, and critical thinking is important. I totally agree with that assessment, because a lot of people were like talking about the distractions in the news right now, like Hunter Biden or whatever, or that they raised the rate of the Fed again in the middle of it. But I think those things are too immediate for like this big of like a long, slow release of the alien thing. I think it plays into the Space Force budget. Maybe you can even like take out the belief that it's going to be for part of the technocracy. I think it's for Space Force budget. That's it. That's what I think about that.
Well, it's funny that they bring that up, because I think, wasn't that like the plot of Civil War or one of those Marvel movies, was that they had this floating fortress that had a bunch of guns, and they were going to use facial recognition technology, and they could just take people out by having this thing up in the sky. And I remember there was a brilliant scene in that movie where the bad guy, like this low level technician, has to like press a button to activate the system that's going to then kill a bunch of people that are considered the government's enemies without due process. And the guy's pointing a gun to him, and he's like, okay, press the button, activate it. And the engineer like looks up and says no. And when I saw this movie, I'm like, this is the most powerful message about what a hero is in this movie, because this guy, who has nothing special about him, he sees something that's wrong. He has a gun pointed to his head, and he's told to do something that is wrong, and he says no, and he holds his ground. And that's like, it's pretty remarkable as a story. So I really loved that aspect of that movie. But
this is something
seeing how that shows up in real life in terms of, how do you get to the point where you have funded and built a system that could do that? Well, this may be how it happens.
This goes kind of in line with it, because it all seems to be, heading off. Like, you wonder why all these places are like allowing all this shoplifting and doing all these sorts of things. And maybe this is conspiratorial. There's a lot of talk about conspiracies this week. And I listened to John Larson's Ezra Taft Benson thing, and them once again talk about conspiratorial thinking and all that sort of stuff. And of course it's coming up because of the alien sorts of deal. But I don't think this is out of bounds at all. I think they obviously are coming up with reasons for more digital surveillance. I think if this isn't the exact reason why or not, I think left and right, you need to realize there's a push for more digital surveillance, digital IDs, digital money, and if it's psyop or if it's conspiracy theory or whatever. Maybe it's even just like right out in the open, but this is one of the things it says. Step 1, allow the shoplifting and demand the companies have few or no solutions. Step 2, face identifying cameras on the door to stop the shoplifting with policing 4.0. Step 3, social credit system only opens doors for compliant subjects. You could call that crazy, but that is how it is in China. Like they have that stuff. I saw this thing this week of showing shaming of people. Jacob Hansen's been talking about shaming a whole lot, but imagine you live in a society where they can show your ID up on a big screen to shame you or block you from being able to use your bank. That kind of goes in line with what's been happening with Nigel Farage right now and all that sorts of stuff. But I do believe that there's a lot of just different little maneuvers to try to up money that goes towards.
That's hilarious because one of the, Stefan Molyneux is a guy, a philosopher on YouTube that in his early career, he made some really good videos, like some really good video essay things about the state and things like that. And he got a really powerful following, a bunch of people. And I listened to a lot of his videos, and he included a whole series on peaceful parenting and a different way to parent your kids without corporal punishment. And it really affected me. But then he started talking about his libertarian utopia and shame and ostracism and shunning were the means by which society was going to control itself. And I'm just like, have you met society? Like, if you make that is not going to be a world I want to live in. And very shortly thereafter, so many red flags of like, this is a cult, ideological, fundamentalist radicalization thing happening. I want nothing to do with it.
I feel bad because I used to listen to him, and I slightly feel bad because I was always just kind of like, listen, I liked some of his debates more than anything, but I let YouTube unperson him for me. What I mean by that is like YouTube got rid of him and I forgot he existed. And whenever that happens, I kind of go, oh, they won in some sort of way, shape, or form. But yeah, I know what you're saying because I never like heard of much of the stuff that they say got culty, but then I heard from other stuff, some of his I don't know, they say that he was kind of, I don't know, making some sort of,
he had a whole thing about DeFu. And anytime you hear anyone who gives credence to DeFu, which is to disconnect yourself from your family of origin, with the idea that if your family of origin doesn't follow your beliefs, i.e. my beliefs or, whoever this leader is, then you should disconnect them from your life because they're a negative influence on your life. That is one of the biggest red flags of a cult dynamic because they're trying to disconnect you from any other support systems or different perspectives in your life so that they're the only one. And he has a whole series about DeFu, and so that was the peak of my participation or giving my listening ear to any of his crap.
Let's see. Somebody was saying, I love Vivek, but Trump makes me laugh. That's all he's done for me. In case I've always said the one benefit of Trump, though, I've always likened it to the idea of, they used to say that one of the reasons you're the doctor, you can correct me on this if it's wrong, but one of the reasons it was difficult to treat herpes is because you had to have it activated to treat it, and you couldn't purposefully activate it. And what I view Trump as is just the herpes activator, if that makes any sense. Like you bring him around, and then that whatever deep underlying thing showed itself badly. But John Larson says all that's not true. Just today there's no such thing as any sort of deep state or anything like that. Vinny Z could tell us. He says Trump means fart in English. He's a regular John Oliver.
Wait, is this the guy that loves us a lot and always says positive things?
Yeah, he's watching out for right-wing dissidents.
Right, he calls me
get us, Vinny Z, get us.
Wealthy Republican.
He's onto us. He's onto us.
We love you, Vinzy. And you're named for a very tasty cheese. So yeah, I can't not like you.
Christopher Rice sees there's a lot of stuff about like the alien. I'm not discounting because I saw somebody kind of joke and say probably the stuff is maybe like some of it's real, maybe, but they knew since 1930 and they're deciding to like release it now for whatever reason. Not that it's for sure aliens or something, but just some of the like maybe there was some craft that they can't identify and who knows what. But some of it is the release time now doesn't make any sense. But I also listen to Shermer, and Shermer thinks it's all kind of regurgitated crap.
Yeah, I think I listened to something by Carl Sagan at one point where, we don't have only to deal with the size of the universe and the chance that we would encounter another existence in physical location, but there's also the age of the universe, and there's the fourth dimension, and there may, the chance that we have another civilization show up, physically close to us is something, but then to have it also show up in the same epoch of time is a bit even further removed. And so the chance of that is pretty minuscule, but it'll be interesting if they come up with
exactly what Savvy D says here is follow the money. That's all. So many.
All right. Well, what do we have to look forward to for the next week? Are
you putting anything out soon?
I had that congressional hearing that happened a while ago that I had on the launch pad that I just never made a thumbnail for. So I finally made a thumbnail and booted it out. There's a couple of things that I want to release that I haven't yet. Actually, just listening to more of the Cultural Revolution stuff made me realize that there's a bunch of Cultural Revolution stuff that I started the ball on and didn't finish that I do need to put out. So I may work on some of that stuff, but I don't have anything really pressing on it. I've just been living my life, playing Yu-Gi-Oh, hanging out with my fam, and so that tends to reduce the time that I put into this stuff. So it's always nice when I can hop on.
The internet wants you to stop touching so much grass.
I think it's an important shift.
Content. Yeah.
I mean, I do enjoy putting stuff out there, but I don't know. I know John DeLynn has picked up on that. My tone and my content and coverage has changed because somebody commented, "Hey, Streeter, you're talking with Hanson. You're hosting him," and I was like, "Well, I think Streeter's been kind of cozying up to some of those apologists. He has for the last year or so." That is true, but it's not because I agree with.
It's not like you haven't been challenging, and then I'm less challenging to them than you are. For sure. Like when I go on with them, I usually just kind of like look for where we agree with stuff. And you still battle him when you go on. He can't say that you don't. But he just barely announced today at the end of his Ezra Task Benjamin stream that he is not political at all. After they just were completely political for 2 hours again.
Balenciaga is not political, just like Mormon Stories podcast.
I had to put it out there in the world because we've been trying to wrestle up Carrie Smith, and she said she would, but then she's been. I'm going to try to get her.
She's been
get her on the line again.
And I have a project trying to find a way to do that spectrum epistemology.
Oh yeah,
live on the air.
The stuff that Bogosian does. You want to do it digitally.
Yeah, I want to do that digitally. So
and if you get that thing working, Bogosian might be interested in that if he sees it. Because I bet you he.
I noticed that. Yeah, there's a meme out there with Matt Damon and Emily Blunt, I think, doing a drinking game, and if they show the camera from the top, and on the table there's a line, and it says agree, strongly agree, and disagree, strongly disagree, and they'll ask a question, and then they put a cup there, and it's just like it's a little similar concept, but it's just done as a drinking game.
That's funny.
That got me thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, if you had the stuff working, man, that could be a tool for a lot of people because there's all sorts of people trying to do the street epistemology stuff. Although, Bogosian's still just doing it live, going around to people and seeing where they stand and where they do. You guys should make another AI vid. That was Jonathan who made it. That was 100% him. He's the one with the computer savvy. He even helps us make the AI images and all that sorts of stuff. We're pretty Luddite-y, the rest of us.
It's fun. It's totally fun seeing how all of the different jobs are going to be eliminated in the future. It's fun because I have nieces that are like, "Oh, I'm an artist. I want to go into art." I'm like, "That's great."
Too late. You missed.
I think there's still a space for it. When you look and see what people do using the AI as a tool, using the various different ways that have come up to manipulate it, you realize there is there's a hierarchy of skill that exists in using AI art and creating AI art. AI is not the great leveler of skill. It certainly will take somebody who's at the lower tier and allow them to go up, but that's because they're acquiring a different skill set than being able to draw perspective perfectly.
Well, I saw a Silicon Valley guy say, and he was totally right. Somebody here sent it. I think Savvy D was the one that sent it to me. He said, AI is not replacing people. People who can use AI is replacing people. So get on it, you know. And I do use it. I actually use ChatGPT at my work all the time. I started using it to write emails. I can start using it to sound more like a pleasant person. Like I can start using it to sound less like a bot. We can even like use the South Park method of like trying to talk to women, since we're all kind of automatons anyway. We can be realism, and we can let the ChatGPT be our idealism. So if we need to learn how to talk better and more sweet and more whatever, we can use it for that.
You just tell ChatGPT to write something, and then you change a word or two, and it's you. You blended your labor with the computer, and it's no different than Photoshop.
Yeah, or that's what I'm asking him to do. Like, I want to tell to this woman that I would like to do the zizek, go for coffee, but please make it real fluffy for me, AI, and AI will help me out with it.
Yeah, well, the other side of that is what they will think when they discover that you did it.
Well, that's the whole South Park story of that. That was an hilarious episode if you didn't see it. But I haven't even thought of trying to do that, but I have used it at work, because my whole life, all of us men, you might have had to do it in our longhouse working world right nowadays. There's lots of times where I just type an email, like say, it's a 5, go click. And I, right before hitting enter, I go, whoa, 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 whoa. Hi, so-and-so, very nice of you to write me today. I'm very happy. And then put down the bottom, best regards, hope all is well. And I had to like stop and do that. I have to do that all the time, but maybe AI can help me with that sort of thing much better. So, but that's the future. Us, we're usually just reactive to what happens in the week. But there was both Jacob Hansen. I know that you know this has been one of my bugaboos for a while, and I still don't know how to get into it because it really is kind of more a political thing. But both Jacob Hansen and John Larson did an Ezra Taft Benson episode this week, and that stuff drives me crazy. Like there's some level of it that I kind of hate being the apologist for Ezra Taft Benson, but at the same time too, there's such misinformation coming out of John Larson's pie hole on it that but I could go through that, not defend him from a religious Jacob Hansen standpoint. I could use Hans Hermann Hoppe, which is one of the people that, along with Mises and all those sorts of guys that I view as a mentor type too. Or, there's just so much about it that we say, I call him type 2 John. Sorry if that's offensive, because it's a double meaning, but there's type 1 errors in so much of stuff of him saying that, type 1 errors, you say someone's pregnant when they aren't. Type 2 error is saying you aren't pregnant, but you are. And they just are exactly wrong on so many of those. Like you make type 1 error, type 2 error, type 1 error, type 2 error. Like not common. This wasn't communism. Yes, it was, John Larson. this was this. And, it's just across the board. And I don't know. I kind of feel like I want to make some ultimate final thing on all of that at the same time too, but at the same time, I don't know what, because he was going on like Ezra Taft Benson, that crazy guy said the gold standard is going to blow up. He's crazy. And he spends a lot of time on that episode saying that. I'm like, do you know how many people say the gold standard, like going off the gold standard is going to make everything blow up? And it's a bit of what we're living through right now. And that's
where that
inflection crazy.
That inflection point on the dollar value, what year it actually goes down to.
Yeah, and he spent a bunch of time on there saying it's crazy as a Taft Benson. You say he's a prophet. He said going off the gold standard is going to cause the dollar to die. And we're like, yeah, we're living that, John Larson. Like, come on, dude. But it's not Ezra Taft Benson. I mean, you got to hear him go and rant and say it, and then just get like, come on, this guy says this. He says this. Oh my gosh. I'm like, Larson, like, where do you live? What planet are you on? And there's just so many.
I don't know. I have such a hard. He is one that I have a hard time listening to.
Yeah. Well,
I think particularly because he came so highly regarded, and then that was what I saw. So it just, he's like, I don't care about your booze because I know who you
Larson the Hut.
Who you cheer?
Yeah,
That's a low blow, Timothy Jones.
That's a low blow. We don't fat shame.
No, I made sure to make
I
him
just called him
husky
type 2.
muscular in the AI.
Yeah, he looks. Every time I see him, like puts my finger on some actor, but I can't ever quite think of who it is. But yeah, I just called him type 2 John though. So, but anyway, I want to go into detail on that, and at the same time too, it's all, even the LDS are like, oh, I don't know about touching that Benson. And if they're all like, if you guys aren't going to touch him and actually, because you guys, I think one of the reasons you don't is you have to actually go into all the claims about him if you want to really contest this, and you guys don't want to go into all the claims about him to really contest it, so you'll stay hands off about it. And there's like so much you can defend about him, but also defending it, you also have to get into where the places he's wrong and type stuff. I think
we want all of our heroes to be perfect and to get everything right, and the bad people to get everything wrong. And if somebody is bad in particularly sensitive areas such as race issues, then we can't give them credence on any other domain.
Even in that realm, like he's not as wrong as Larson makes him out to be on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And in other areas, he was wrong on that one. But it's like, I feel like there could be like you could make a fully neutral book on Ezra Taft Benson that's never been fully fleshed out, because it's either got to be apologists who don't really want to go into the details about him, or then that side who their mythology of how bad he is just as full of over the top, creations of him as the devil. That's just not true. And there's a lot of stuff that I call it like the boomer truth regime, to use a cardinism or something like that. But there's all sorts of ideas, like just assumptions about McCarthyism, or assumptions about, oh my gosh, he did this, he did that your only real thing is saying like, oh my gosh, something like, oh my gosh, he said there was communism in the civil rights movement. Like, that's not an argument. You know what I mean? There's
did he see any of the Black Panther literature?
Yeah, but you feel like you can wave it away just by saying, oh, that's racist, oh my gosh. And there's just so much to go into all that of saying like, and there's a million things with him with that, and I want to flesh it out fully at some point, and I'm always too lazy to do it too. And then
ChatGPT, send a summary of John Larson's.
There you go. You could do that. Well, I mean, there's his stuff, and then there's like the stuff you could contest with every single one of it, like their claims of McCarthyism. And then I don't know where there was communism in the agriculture of the state agriculture party. Have you heard of Cesar Chavez, the Chicano movement? Those are full commies all the way. All the pickers of the like. What are you? I just don't even like the stuff that they say is just like should just be assumed. That is just so obviously like we know that existed. There was this joke that said, like, this lady, I found it from a Razorfist video about Hollywood being super Marxist, and watch the Coen Brother movies Hail Caesar if you want anybody to go into detail about how much communism was in Hollywood. But this lady was talking about the Crucible, which was like an overt metaphor for supposedly the McCarthyism in Hollywood, which was all kind of overblown. But some lady came along and said, listen, fellas, the witches aren't real. The communists were real. Like, they were there. There is not witches. It's not a witch hunt when they were there, when it was actually just part of the whole entire thing and being funded by Russia. And then there's that flip end of the whole entire thing that we just lived through people who were hallucinating about Russia taking over a country for several years. But then they can just say in a breathless way, he said the administration was overrun by Russia. And that's your argument. And you kind of go, well, you guys too, And I don't know. Every time.
Well, on that note, so I have to leave now.
Yeah, I gotta
but what I want to hear is
thanks for filling in. Jonathan jumped in to fill in because these other guys didn't, and
those clowns.
We get a heavy hitter to come fill in.
Are you kidding me? I am nowhere near as fun or entertaining or as
no way. You're the heaviest hitter
Flip
around.
And Jared.
Wait.
I enjoy y'all. Okay, but what is, if you were going to recommend to your audience the book that they should check out in the coming week and listen to while they were, in the Temple of Swole while they're, pumping iron or whatever?
What am I
would the
listening
book-
to?
Yeah, what are you going to recommend that your audience listen to?
Well, listen to Hans Hermann Hoppe, Democracy: The God That Failed, and you can get into some of the details of. Then go listen to the Larson episode. Like Hans Hermann Hoppe is somebody worth getting into just to understand how much kind of misinfo we've just been even fed by Hollywood as far as like all that McCarthyism goes. Go listen to Razor Fist video on Hollywood too, and he also recommends Democracy: The God That Failed from Hans Hermann Hoppe.
That's
But
something
Hans
tangible.
Hermann Hoppe is also somebody who's interesting to get into if you want to just understand why you can have some question marks about certain ideas from empiricism and Popper and all that stuff, and it doesn't have to be coming from a religious angle. There's just some other ideas about truth, and that there's some extra types of truth beyond just like negative thinking and empiricism and that sort of deal. And it's worth knowing that stuff to know if you ever get into like epistemology battles, as all of us are wont to do.
And I will add to that, my recommendation is The White Pill, A Tale of Good and Evil by Michael Malice.
And watch him on Tim Pool with Roseanne Barr. That was hilarious. It's
a book it's a bunch of historical vignettes with people confronting the reality of the Cultural Revolution that kind of was attempted in the 60s and beyond, and the changes that we saw. Particularly, it starts out with this dramatic moment with Ayn Rand in a congressional hearing where she's trying to convey to them the horrors of communism, what happened, and people are like, we can't believe you, because this is before the horrors of Soviet Russia were well known. And her statement was like, I cannot convey to a free people what it really means to live in a totalitarian society, because you guys have no concept of what it means to truly not be free. And then what follows are a bunch of stories, in some cases of activists in the United States who are pro-communist, pro-socialist, and end up getting deported or travel to Russia and live there for a period of time, and then come back and they're like, absolutely not. And he goes even back further and shows how some of the various movements of the 20th century pushed the meter a little bit closer to the left direction in the United States and in Europe. But it's just, if you love history and you love unknown chapters of history, there's so many good little stories in there, and Malice tells it with a very entertaining thing. If you get the audiobook, his voice and the way that he tells his story is great. So that's going to be my recommendation.
Yeah, those unknown chapters of history. So much of what we don't know about history, because our schooling was red washed, not whitewashed, is that there really was all sorts of wild communism everywhere through that century. And even within our country, and they were infiltrating, and it's not crazy. And like so many times, just
Not
like
conspiracy.
They admitted it and said it themselves in their own books and talk about it themselves. And it was in all sorts of different departments, sectors, worlds, Hollywood. Watch Hail Caesar, and then after watching Hail Caesar, say, oh, I guess those Coen brothers are Jewish conspiracy theorists about commie infiltration into Hollywood, but
and the funny thing about this book is it's called White Pilled, and you'll
White
get to
Pill.
like 80%
And
of the
it's
book, and you're like, these are all very depressing stories about society crumbling and violence taking over. But the notion of the white pill is that he points out that in all of these things that happened in the 20th century, the societies that were so bitterly affected by them, reform came, and people got out of the worst depth of those totalitarian regimes. Some of those societies are not out of the woods yet, but however depressed you may feel in the West, just know that you can get through it. And so you kind of just have to have a view of how to survive in some instances. And we have people like Solzhenitsyn who give us a method. Even if you can't be the one who's fighting back against the totalitarianism, at least you cannot be the one through which its lies are perpetuated. And something as simple and basic as that can be a thing. But you don't necessarily know how dark things can get unless you study some history and realize how important it is to understand, respect, and preserve those facets of our society which act as a protection against that.
Did I say the book wrong? Is Democracy the God That Fails? I think I said it right, but that's the one I was recommending. Yeah, so yeah, check that stuff out. And somebody said Behind Enemy Lines. I just watched that movie about the two snipers, and I hadn't seen that in years and years and years. I think it's called Behind Enemy Lines with what are those actors' names? Two snipers. One's on the Russian side and one's on the German side. It's got the guy who plays Dumbledore in the new stuff.
Jude Law?
Jude Law and the guy who drowns in Abyss. Why am I forgetting her name? Doesn't drown. He's married to the woman. He's married to the woman who almost drowned. What's his name? Ed Harris. And they're both snipers chasing each other down. But what's really good about it is it actually gets into stuff at the end of the movie. I wouldn't be surprised to seeing the Hollywood movies. Like they start talking about it's the Russians versus the Germans, and so you can say the Russians are the heroes there. But towards the end of it, they start talking about how one of these guys is like a super sniper, and they start talking about how it's impossible for us to be even. It's impossible to be equal. It's impossible for us to be equal in love and all that sort of stuff. Plus, it's got really awesome sniper back and forth. Check that movie out. I think it was on Netflix or Prime. If you want just like old school stuff that's not so current day. And then let's all go watch Barbie.
Yeah. Okay, so next time we'll get our Barbie review.
Yeah. Thanks for filling in. Thanks for chit-chatting, everybody. Thanks for talking and listening.
Remember, you are Knuff. See how that plays out.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Go walk Charlie. All right, bye.
I will. All right, later.